4 people were supposed to testify against one of the largest construction companies in the city. None of them ever made it to court. The strange part wasn't that they disappeared. It was that nobody reported them missing. One stopped answering his phone. Another's neighbors assumed she had moved away. A third simply vanished from work. The last was never mentioned again. Months became years. The cases were forgotten. The company kept winning government contracts. The city kept growing, and nobody asked what had happened to the witnesses. Until one detective noticed something buried inside thousands of old court records. 4 different cases. 4 different years. 4 different witnesses. One company. One impossible pattern. Because people don't simply disappear without leaving a trace. Unless someone has learned how to erase them completely. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of the Major Crimes Division as Detective Emma Hayes stared at a stack of old court files that nobody had touched in years. The folder had arrived by accident. Or at least, that's what the evidence clerk believed. A flood in the courthouse basement had damaged several storage shelves. Boxes that hadn't been opened in nearly a decade were being digitized before mold destroyed them. Most of the files involved minor fraud, dismissed charges, or civil disputes that no longer mattered. Emma had volunteered to help sort them. It was quiet work. The kind of assignment detectives usually complained about. Emma preferred it. Paper had a habit of remembering things that people forgot. She adjusted her glasses and continued scanning another witness list. Construction permit fraud. 3 defendants. Case dismissed. Nothing unusual. She set it aside and reached for the next folder. Another construction case. Different year. Different company. Different judge. Again, nothing remarkable. Then one line caught her attention. East key witness unable to testify. Ketters. She paused. Witnesses died. Witnesses recanted. Witnesses disappeared from town. It happened. But who unable to testify felt strangely vague. She flipped through the remaining pages. No explanation. No follow-up. No transcript. Just a short notation that the prosecution had requested a delay before eventually dropping several major charges. Emma placed the file beside her keyboard. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. She opened another folder. Another construction investigation. Different neighborhood. Different prosecutors. Different defendants. Another witness. Another note. Witness unavailable. Emma leaned back. 2 cases didn't mean much, but they were enough to keep her turning pages. Outside her office, detectives argued over coffee, phones rang without pause, and printers hummed endlessly. Emma barely noticed. She had slipped into the quiet mental space where tiny details started connecting. An hour later, she had 4 files spread across her desk. 4 unrelated criminal cases. 4 different years. 4 different judges. 4 different prosecutors. 4 different lead investigators. But every one involved large commercial construction projects, and every one had collapsed after the primary witness failed to appear. She grabbed a legal pad. Instead of writing the case numbers, she wrote the witness names. Nathan Briggs, Linda Carver, Anthony Ruiz, Grace Whitmore. She searched each name in the department database. Nothing. No criminal history. No traffic citations. No arrests. Not unusual. She searched missing persons. Nothing. She searched death certificates. Nothing. She frowned. Most adults leave trails. Driver's license renewals. Property taxes. Employment records. Hospital visits. Marriage licenses. Something. These 4 seemed to stop existing. Emma expanded the search beyond police databases. Still nothing. It wasn't that the records had been sealed. They simply ended. No forwarding addresses. No obituary. No retirement. No bankruptcy. No divorce filings. No passport renewals. Nothing after the dates they were supposed to testify. Her office door opened. Ben Torres carried 2 coffees. "You've been hiding in here all morning." Emma accepted the cup without looking away from the monitor. Thanks. Ben glanced at the files covering her desk. You volunteering for museum duty now. She slid one folder toward him, read the witness page. He skimmed it. Construction fraud. Keep reading. He found the notation. Witness unavailable. So. She handed him another file. Then another. Then another. His smile faded. Same wording. Exactly. Ben looked at the names. You think they're connected? I don't know. They're years apart. I know. Different companies. I know. Different prosecutors. I know. So what are we looking at? Emma turned her monitor toward him. I searched every witness. Ben studied the screen. No records. They just stop. He shrugged. Maybe they moved. All four. Possible. Without changing driver's licenses. Ben hesitated. Without paying taxes. He said nothing. Without opening bank accounts. Silence. Emma wasn't trying to prove herself right. She was trying to convince herself she was wrong. Patterns were dangerous. Detectives sometimes saw connections where none existed. It ruined careers. She knew that better than anyone. Ben sat across from her. What started this? Emma held up the damp cardboard box from the courthouse. Pure luck. He laughed softly. The best cases usually do. Daniel Mercer walked in carrying a tablet under one arm. You two look way too serious for paperwork. Ben gestured toward the files. Emma thinks ghosts testified in corruption cases. I never said ghosts. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What did you say? I said 4 people vanished. Daniel looked intrigued. Missing persons. No. Dead? No. Witness protection. I checked. He pulled up a chair. Emma summarized the timeline. 1 witness every year or 2. Everyone connected to construction fraud. Everyone disappeared before taking the stand. No missing person reports. No official deaths. No financial activity afterward. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he tapped thoughtfully on the desk. You know what bothers me? Emma nodded. The missing persons. No. The timing. He pointed at Nathan Briggs' file. If someone disappeared voluntarily, there would still be digital residue. Exactly. Cell phones, email accounts, medical insurance, credit reports. Even people trying to disappear accidentally leave footprints. These 4 left none. Ben crossed his arms. So somebody erased them. Daniel didn't answer immediately. I don't know. But if someone did... He looked at Emma. They had help. The room fell quiet, because everyone understood what that meant. Not one person. Not one criminal. An entire system. Emma closed the last folder. I need the original witness statements. Ben nodded. I'll request them. And the investigators. I'll track them down. Daniel stood. I'll search archived servers. Maybe something survived that isn't in the court files. Emma smiled faintly. Thank you. As they left, she remained seated. Something still bothered her. She couldn't explain why. She picked up Nathan Briggs' file again. 40, 3 years old. Demolition foreman. Married. 1 daughter. Scheduled to testify against soy infrastructure 8 years earlier. Then, nothing. No forwarding address. No resignation letter. No insurance claim. No death. No missing person report. Just silence. She flipped to the property records. One line stopped her cold. His apartment lease had remained active for nearly 5 months after he supposedly left town. Rent had been paid automatically. Electricity stayed on. Water usage remained almost non-existent. Someone had continued paying for an empty apartment. Emma stared at the address. Most investigators would have moved on years ago. The apartment had likely been rented by dozens of people since then. Any evidence would be gone. Still, something told her to go. She picked up her coat. An hour later, she stood outside a weathered brick apartment building on the east side of the city. The manager unlocked apartment 3B. No one's lived here for years, he said. Buildings scheduled for renovation. The door creaked open. Dust floated through beams of afternoon sunlight. The rooms were almost empty. No furniture, no clothes, no dishes. Just stained walls and faded carpet. It looked exactly like every abandoned apartment she'd ever entered. Emma slowly walked through the living room, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom. Nothing. She was about to leave when she noticed something unusual. A narrow hallway closet stood slightly open. Inside sat a single cardboard box. The manager frowned. That's strange. Emma knelt beside it. She carefully lifted the lid. Inside were family photographs. A little girl riding a bicycle. A husband and wife smiling beside a birthday cake. A family at the beach. Christmas morning. School pictures. Vacation snapshots. Dozens of memories. Left behind. Emma held one photograph in her hand. Emma carried the cardboard box of photographs back to Major Crimes as carefully as if it contained evidence from an active homicide. In a way, it did. Not because the photographs proved anyone had been murdered. Because they proved someone had been loved. That made it much harder to believe Nathan Briggs had simply walked away. Lisa Grant looked up from her workstation as Emma entered the evidence lab. I thought you were checking out an abandoned apartment. I was. Emma set the box on the examination table. Lisa removed a pair of nitrile gloves from the dispenser. You found something. Maybe. She lifted the lid. Lisa's expression changed immediately. Family photos. Emma nodded. Every single one. Lisa picked up a framed photograph showing Nathan, his wife Sarah, and a little girl sitting on the hood of an old pickup truck. They looked sunburned, happy, and completely ordinary. If he planned to disappear, Lisa said quietly, packed his furniture but left this. That's what bothers me. Lisa nodded. People forget socks. Chargers. Kitchen utensils. She looked around the box. They don't forget every picture of their family. Emma leaned against the table. The apartment manager said no one has lived there for years. Lisa looked thoughtful. Let's see if that's true. An hour later, Lisa had finished dusting the box. Most of the fingerprints belonged to Nathan, Sarah, and what was likely their daughter. There were a handful of partial prints too old and smudged to identify. Nothing unexpected. Nothing useful. Emma wasn't disappointed. She hadn't expected a miracle from fingerprints that had sat untouched for 8 years. Sometimes the smallest inconsistencies mattered more. She spread the photographs across the table in chronological order. Birthday parties, camping trips, Christmas mornings, school recitals. Then, nothing. The photographs simply stopped. The newest one was taken 3 weeks before Nathan had been scheduled to testify. After that, no birthdays, no holidays, no family vacations. Life had been cut cleanly in half. Ben returned carrying a thick folder. I found Sarah Briggs. Emma looked up. Current address. Still in the city. Remarried. New. Moved. New. Ben sat down. She still lives in the same house. Emma frowned. I thought Nathan abandoned the family. So did everyone else. He opened the folder. Neighbors told detectives 8 years ago that Nathan packed up and left. Did anyone actually see him leave? Ben hesitated. No. Emma looked up. What do you mean? They saw moving trucks. And they assumed Nathan was inside. Emma exchanged a glance with Lisa. Assumed. The investigation had been built on assumptions. Daniel Mercer walked into the conference room carrying a laptop. I've got something. He connected it to the large monitor. I searched archived utility records. A graph appeared. Apartment 3B electricity usage, water usage, gas usage. Emma leaned forward. Electricity remained consistent for nearly 5 months after Nathan supposedly disappeared. Not high, not low. Just enough to keep lights, a refrigerator, and a few appliances running. Water usage. Almost zero. Ben frowned. So no one's showering. Nope. No laundry. No cooking. Daniel pointed at the graph. But every evening between 6 and midnight, electricity spikes. Emma studied the pattern. Exactly the same every night, like clockwork. What causes that? Daniel answered immediately. Lamps. Television. Maybe a radio. Ben looked confused. Why would someone turn on lights in an empty apartment? Nobody answered. Because they were all thinking the same thing. Someone wanted the apartment to look occupied. 2. Emma drove back to the building just before sunset. From the sidewalk across the street, she looked up toward apartment 3B. The windows faced the road. Perfectly visible. She imagined someone walking past years earlier. Lights on. Curtains closed. Nothing suspicious. No reason to question whether anyone still lived there. A simple illusion. One maintained every evening. For months. She looked at the neighboring apartments. An elderly woman stepped onto her balcony carrying a watering can. Emma crossed the street. She introduced herself and showed her badge. I'm looking into someone who used to live here. Nathan Briggs. The woman's face brightened with recognition. Oh, the nice young family. You remember them? Of course. When did they leave? The woman frowned. I don't know. Emma waited. I never actually saw them leave. What do you remember? The woman thought for several seconds. I remember seeing lights. Every night. And Emma remained silent. And then one day, the woman shrugged. The apartment was empty. Were there moving trucks? Oh yes. How many? I think. She squinted toward the parking lot as if trying to see into the past. 2. Did you see Nathan? No. His wife? No. The little girl? No. Then who was moving the furniture? She frowned again. I don't know. Emma thanked her and turned to leave. Detective. Emma stopped. The woman looked uncomfortable. There was something strange. What? The trucks came very late. How late? After midnight. Emma slowly turned back. You're sure? I couldn't sleep. She pointed toward apartment 3B. I watched from my window. What did you see? Men. How many? 4 or 5. In uniforms. No. They didn't speak. They just carried everything out. Emma felt a chill. Were the lights on? Less. The whole time. What happened when they finished? The woman looked directly at Emma. They turned every light off. And drove away. Back at headquarters, Emma pinned a city map onto the investigation board. Nathan Briggs, apartment 3B. Scheduled testimony, construction fraud. Late night movers. 5 months of electricity, no water. No confirmed departure. She stepped back. Something about the timeline still bothered her. 5 months. Why 5? Why not 1 week? Why not a year? Someone had maintained the illusion just long enough. Long enough for neighbors to stop paying attention. Long enough for employers to move on. Long enough for family and friends to accept a simple explanation. He left. Life moved on. Case closed. Ben entered carrying 2 sandwiches. You've been staring at that board for 20 minutes. Emma accepted one without looking away. I keep thinking about the electricity. What about it? Wasn't random. She circled the dates. Every evening. Same hours. Same usage. Someone followed a schedule. Ben nodded slowly, like going to work. Exactly. Whoever had kept the apartment alive treated it like a job. Just after 8 that evening, Daniel called. His voice sounded unusually tense. Emma? What is it? I searched property tax archives, and I found something odd. What? The apartment wasn't the only place. Emma stopped writing. What do you mean? Daniel took a breath. I checked Linda Carver, the second witness. Her house showed the exact same utility pattern. Emma felt the room become very quiet. How long? 4 months. And Anthony Ruse. I'm checking now. Several seconds passed. Then Daniel spoke again. Emma? What? Anthony's condo. 6 months. The exact same evening electricity pattern. Emma slowly lowered the phone. 1 apartment could be explained away. 2 was unlikely. 3 meant someone wasn't hiding people. Someone was staging disappearances. She looked up at the investigation board. The photographs of 4 smiling witnesses suddenly felt different. She no longer believed they had vanished separately. Someone had followed the same procedure. Every single time, and procedures belonged to organizations, not individuals. The next morning, Emma Hayes parked outside a modest one-story house on the western edge of the city. According to property records, Sarah Briggs still lived there. The mortgage had never changed. The utilities had remained in her name. For 8 years, she'd continued living in the same home, where she'd raised a family with Nathan Briggs. If Nathan had truly walked away, he had never come back. Ben Torres joined Emma on the front walkway. "You want me to take the lead?" Emma shook her head. "She's been living with this story for 8 years. If it's wrong, I don't want it to feel like an interrogation." Ben nodded. Emma knocked gently. After nearly a minute, the door opened. A woman in her early 50s stood in the doorway. She looked older than her age, not because of wrinkles, because of exhaustion that had settled into her eyes over many years. "Mrs. Briggs." "Yes." Emma held up her badge. "Detective Emma Hayes." "This is Detective Ben Torres. Would like to ask you a few questions about your husband." Sarah froze. For several seconds she didn't speak. Finally she stepped aside. "I haven't heard that name from the police in years." The living room was simple, clean, comfortable. Family photographs decorated nearly every shelf. Emma noticed something immediately. Nathan appeared in every older photograph. None of the newer ones. It was as though someone had been carefully erased from the family's future without touching the past. Sarah noticed Emma looking. "I never took them down." Emma nodded. "You shouldn't have to." Sarah managed a tired smile. "I wasn't sure if I should." Two coffee sat untouched between them. Sarah folded her hands tightly together. "I thought this was over." Emma answered honestly. "So did everyone else." Sarah looked confused. "What changed?" Emma chose her words carefully. "We're reviewing several old construction investigations." Nathan's name came up. Sarah looked down at the table. "I don't know what I can tell you." "When was the last time you saw your husband?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She stared at the coffee, as though trying to remember a life that belonged to someone else. "The night before work." "What happened?" "I left early the next morning." "Did you see him leave?" "No. I was asleep." "You woke up after he'd gone?" "Yes." "Were his clothes gone?" "I think so." "His truck?" "It was gone." Emma nodded slowly. "What happened after that?" Sarah sighed. "He called once." Emma looked up sharply. "He did." Sarah nodded. "About 2 days later." "What did he say?" "He said he was sorry. He said he couldn't explain. He told me not to look for him." Ben quietly asked, "Did he say where he was?" "Nope." "Did he sound frightened?" Sarah thought about it. "No. He sounded—" She struggled to find the word. "Flat." Emma noticed the change in her voice. As if he were reading something. Sarah's eyes widened. "Yes. Exactly. I always thought that was strange." Emma took out a notebook. "Did you recognize the phone number?" Sarah shook her head. "It showed as blocked." "How long did you talk?" "Maybe 30 seconds. "What happened after that?" "I tried calling back. There wasn't a number." Emma made a note. "Did he ever contact your daughter?" Sarah swallowed hard. "No." Emma looked toward the family photographs again. Nathan looked like the kind of father who built treehouses, who coached Little League, who never missed birthdays. Walking away without speaking to his daughter didn't fit the man in those pictures, not even close. "Mrs. Briggs," Emma said gently, "can I ask you something difficult?" Sarah nodded. "Did you ever believe he left voluntarily?" The room became completely silent. Finally Sarah whispered, "No." Ben looked up. Sarah stared out the living room window. "I kept telling everyone something was wrong. My parents. His parents. Our friends. The police. No one listened." "What made you feel that way?" Sarah stood and walked toward a bookshelf. She returned carrying a small wooden box. She opened it carefully. Inside lay birthday cards, anniversary cards, handwritten notes. Emma picked one up. Nathan's handwriting covered the page. Short sentences, simple words, warm, personal. Sarah smiled faintly. He wrote me notes all the time. Emma nodded. I can see that. Sarah reached beneath the stack. I also kept something else. She unfolded a single sheet of paper. This arrived 3 weeks after the phone call. Emma read silently. Sarah, I'm leaving. Don't try to find me. It's better this way. Take care of Emily. Nathan. Emma looked at the signature. Something immediately felt wrong. She couldn't explain why. Only that it lacked the warmth that every handwritten note surrounding it. May I? Sarah nodded. Emma placed Nathan's older notes beside the letter. She compared the handwriting. The individual letters looked convincing, almost perfect. Too perfect. Every curve, every angle, every spacing. Ben leaned closer. What do you see? Emma pointed. Pressure? What? The pen pressure. She handed Ben an older birthday card. Look at the downstrokes. Heavy, natural, confident. Then she pointed at the goodbye letter. Every stroke carried exactly the same pressure. Perfectly even. Almost mechanical. This wasn't written naturally. Sarah stared at Emma. What are you saying? I'm saying. Emma chose her words carefully. I'd like our document examiner to look at this. Sarah's breathing became shallow. You think someone forged it? I don't know yet. But I don't like it. On the drive back, neither detective spoke for several minutes. Finally, Ben broke the silence. If that letter's fake, Emma finished the sentence. Then the entire story falls apart. No goodbye. No voluntary disappearance. No proof Nathan ever chose to leave. Ben looked out the passenger window. 8 years. Emma nodded. 8 years of believing she'd been abandoned. Lisa Grant met them in the forensic lab. She carefully photographed the farewell letter before placing it beneath a digital microscope. Emma watched the enlarged handwriting appear on the monitor. Lisa compared it against Nathan's older notes. After nearly 20 minutes, she leaned back. I can't give you a final opinion. Emma waited. But Lisa zoomed in further. These signatures were almost certainly traced. Ben frowned. Traced. Lisa nodded. Someone copied genuine handwriting. The shapes are right. But natural writing has tiny hesitations. Speed changes. Pressure changes. This, she tapped the screen, looks like someone was trying very hard not to make a mistake. Sarah had been telling the truth. The letter never felt real. That afternoon, Daniel Mercer called from Digital Forensics. I've got something. Emma put him on speaker. What did you find? I recovered archived phone billing records. For Nathan. Yes. The blocked call Sarah received. Emma sat forward. Can you trace it? Daniel hesitated. Not completely. But I know where it originated. Where? It wasn't another city. It wasn't another state. It came from inside the city. And Emma exchanged a glance with Ben. Public payphone. New. Business line. New. Daniel's voice grew quieter. It came from a government-owned switchboard. The room fell silent. What government agency? I don't know. The records don't say. But whoever made that call used government infrastructure. Emma slowly looked back at Nathan's photograph pinned to the investigation board. A forged goodbye letter. A scripted phone call. An apartment kept artificially alive. Someone had wanted Sarah to believe her husband had abandoned her. Someone with access to government resources. Someone organized enough to leave almost nothing behind. Almost. Emma pinned a new card beneath Nathan Briggs' photograph. Isa farbala ledi tirar like hello far jadid then another. EPLSO KLO GOVR and MNTKAHBOARD. She stepped back and studied the board. The conspiracy was no longer theoretical. Someone had invested time, money, planning, and official resources to erase one ordinary construction foreman. The only remaining question was, why? Emma arrived at Major Crimes before sunrise. The investigation board now covered nearly an entire wall. 4 witness photographs. 4 abandoned court cases. 3 apartments kept artificially alive. A forged farewell letter. A phone call routed through a government switchboard. It no longer looked like a collection of coincidences. It looked like a system. Ben walked in carrying a paper bag from the diner across the street. "You've been here all night." Emma looked up from a stack of documents. "I went home?" Ben raised an eyebrow. "For how long?" She checked her watch. "About 4 hours." Ben smiled. "I'll count that as progress." He comped at 8 sharp. Daniel Mercer entered the conference room with his laptop tucked under one arm. "I think I found our first real break." Emma looked up. "What did you recover?" Daniel connected his laptop to the large display. "I started digging through archived court servers. I wasn't looking for case files. I was looking for communication." Ben frowned. "Emails." Daniel nodded. "Specifically between prosecutors, investigators, and witnesses." "Anything?" "Not at first." He brought up a timeline. Most of the emails had been deleted years ago. Emma wasn't surprised. Retention policy. Daniel shook his head. "No. They were manually removed." He clicked another window. "But people misunderstand digital evidence. Deleting an email isn't always the same as destroying it." Daniel opened a recovered archive. The message was incomplete. Fragments of text remained. Most of the body had been overwritten. But the header survived. "East from's Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter sex to Nathan Briggs sexer's subject is meeting confirmation." Emma leaned closer. "Can you recover the rest?" Daniel nodded slightly. Summally, he highlighted damaged text. "Tor thank you for agreeing to testify. Tor please arrive. Tor witness security arrangements." The remaining lines were unreadable. Ben folded his arms. "Witness security." Emma repeated the words quietly. "Witness security arrangements." Daniel nodded. There were similar emails for Linda Carver. Another file appeared. Then Anthony Ruiz. Then Grace Whitmore. Each message contained different dates. Different prosecutors. Different assistants. But one identical phrase. "Assess witness security arrangements." Emma frowned. "If security was arranged, where are the records?" Daniel looked at her. "That's exactly the problem. There aren't any." Kevin Chen entered the room carrying a tablet. "I heard we're chasing ghosts." Daniel smiled. "Digital ghosts." Kevin set the tablet down. "I checked federal witness protection. No matches. State witness relocation. No. Emergency protective custody. Nothing." Ben looked confused. "So prosecutors discussed witness security delay, but no agency ever documented it." Kevin nodded. "Exactly." Emma walked to the whiteboard. She wrote one sentence in large black letters. "Navadicha pravadi t securidras." Nobody had an answer. Two later that morning, Emma and Ben visited the courthouse archives. Most of the old administrative offices had been converted into storage. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Thousands of faded boxes lined the aisles. The archive supervisor, Harold Simmons, greeted them with a tired smile. "Detectives, what can I do for you?" Emma handed him 4 case numbers. "I'm looking for administrative correspondence." Harold adjusted his glasses. "Those cases are old." "I know. It'll take some time. We're not in a hurry." Harold disappeared into the rows of shelves. Nearly 30 minutes later he returned carrying 2 dusty binders. "This is everything." Emma immediately noticed something odd. The binders were much thinner than expected. "Is anything missing?" Harold looked uncomfortable. "Officially, nothing. Unofficially." He hesitated. "We had a records audit about 7 years ago." "What kind of audit?" "I'm not sure. Several people from City Hall came through. They removed boxes." Ben looked up. "Removed." "They said duplicate files were being consolidated." "Did you verify that?" Harold gave a helpless shrug. "They had paperwork." They had authorization. Emma exchanged a glance with Ben. Who signed the authorization? Harold walked toward an old filing cabinet. After several minutes, he returned with a yellowed photocopy. Emma read the signature. Office of Municipal Infrastructure Oversight. Ben frowned. I've never heard of that department. Harold nodded. It doesn't exist anymore. When was it dissolved? About 6 years ago. Emma carefully folded the document. Sometimes conspiracies didn't hide evidence. They simply created temporary offices to move it legally. Back at headquarters, Daniel called everyone into digital forensics. I recovered more email fragments. The room quieted. Daniel projected 4 different email headers. Every recovered message had been sent from different prosecutors. Different years. Different cases. Yet one detail remained exactly the same. Each email had passed through the same internal routing server before reaching the witness. Kevin leaned forward. That's strange. And Emma looked at him. Why? Because prosecutors normally use separate departmental servers. What does this mean? Kevin zoomed in. Somebody redirected the messages. Before delivery. Ben frowned. Is that normal? No. Could it happen accidentally? Kevin shook his head. Not a chance. Someone, with administrator-level access, had intercepted every communication. Not afterward. Before the witnesses ever received them. Daniel restored another fragment. This one contained only a few readable lines. Your transportation will arrive tor do not inform tor follow instructions. Emma stared at the screen. Transportation. Ben looked at Daniel. You think someone picked them up? Daniel nodded slowly. It sounds like it. And Emma finished the thought. They believed they were being taken somewhere safe. Nobody spoke. The implications settled over the room. If the witnesses trusted the people collecting them, they wouldn't fight. They wouldn't run. They would willingly get into the vehicle. Emma stood in front of the investigation board. She pinned printed copies of the recovered emails beneath each witness. Then she stepped back. The board now told a different story. Not disappearances. A process. Step 1, witness agrees to testify. Step 2, security arrangements are discussed. Step 3, transportation is scheduled. Step 4, witness disappears. Step 5, apartment remains artificially occupied. Step 6, farewell message reaches family. Ben studied the sequence. That's not random. Emma nodded. It's a checklist. Late that afternoon, Kevin walked into Emma's office holding a flash drive. I found something I almost missed. What is it? I searched every deleted email connected to those 4 cases. And they weren't deleted individually. Emma looked up. They were deleted in batches. Kevin connected the drive. A log appeared on the screen. 4 different cases. 4 different years. Hundreds of emails removed. All within minutes of one another. Ben leaned closer. Who had access? Kevin highlighted a single account. CITY, ADMINO4s, no name. Kevin shook his head. The user account was destroyed. When? The day after the last witness disappeared. Emma frowned. Can you recover the owner? I'm trying. What have you got? Kevin hesitated. Just one thing. He enlarged a tiny metadata field buried inside the server log. Every deleted email contained the same forwarding destination before removal. Not another prosecutor. Not another detective. Not a federal agency. One internal address. The Syrism H. Cientrali. Ben looked puzzled. What is that? Kevin slowly shook his head. I don't know. I've searched every current city department. It doesn't exist. Emma stared at the screen. Another ghost. Another department that officially wasn't there, but ghosts left footprints. And now they had a name. HMCRLs, somewhere inside City Hall. A department that no longer officially existed had quietly intercepted witnesses, redirected communications, and erased the digital trail. Emma looked at the investigation board one last time before leaving for the night. They had started with 4 missing witnesses. Now they were chasing an invisible office hidden inside the city's own government. And someone, somewhere, already knew they were getting close. The investigation had officially entered its 5th day. For Detective Emma Hayes, it felt much longer. The evidence board continued to grow. Photographs, court records, utility reports, recovered emails, foliated documents, deleted server logs. And now, a department inside City Hall that officially didn't exist. Still, there was one question Emma couldn't answer. If every digital record had been erased, why hadn't every paper record disappeared too? Someone meticulous enough to intercept witnesses and delete hundreds of emails wouldn't simply forget a filing cabinet. Unless they had. Lisa Grant arrived at record storage just after 8 that morning. The city archives occupied the basement of an old municipal building that smelled faintly of dust and aging paper. Unlike the courthouse archives, this building stored investigative files created by police departments, inspectors, and city agencies. If anything had survived, it would be here. The record supervisor, Helen Watkins, greeted Lisa with a tired smile. Back again. Lisa smiled. I'm afraid so. Helen laughed softly. You detectives only come down here when computers stop helping. Today's one of those days. Lisa handed over a list of case numbers connected to the 4 missing witnesses. I'm looking for anything that wasn't scanned. Helen adjusted her glasses. That covers a lot of years. I know. Give me a little time. Nearly an hour passed before Helen returned with 3 archive boxes. Lisa carefully opened the first. Inspection reports, building permits, environmental assessments, everything expected, nothing unusual. The second box held financial disclosures. Again, nothing. She opened the third. It was almost empty. Only a handful of folders remained. Helen frowned. That's odd. What is? This box should be full. Lisa looked up. What happened to the rest? Helen checked the inventory sheet attached to the lid. It says the contents were transferred. When? Helen squinted. 7 years ago. Transferred where? She shook her head. It doesn't say. Ooh. Lisa spent the next 2 hours examining every remaining folder. Most contained routine paperwork, meeting schedules, permit requests, administrative memos. Then something caught her attention. One folder was noticeably thicker than the others. Its label simply read Severs BS Case UPF no department. No date. No explanation. Lisa carefully opened it. Inside were dozens of photocopies. Every page bore a bright red stamp. Quasi archivl kifil piustiano destioe. Lisa frowned. Why would someone create backup copies, then leave them behind? Tihu. She immediately called Emma. You need to come down here. And Emma arrived less than 20 minutes later with Ben close behind. Lisa spread the contents across a large examination table. I think somebody made personal backup copies. Emma picked up the first document. It was a witness scheduling form. Nathan Briggs. Scheduled transportation. Pickup time, 7:30 a.m. Pickup location. Residence. Transportation Unit 2. The line had been blacked out with permanent marker. Ben looked at another page. Linda Carver. Same format. Same missing section. Anthony Ruiz. Grace Whitmore. Every transportation unit had been deliberately concealed. Emma looked at Lisa. Anything else? Lisa nodded. The originals are gone. These are photocopies. Someone copied them before they disappeared. Leek Daniel joined them carrying his laptop. He examined the documents carefully. The black marker doesn't bother me. Emma looked surprised. It doesn't? Nope. What bothers me is what they forgot. He pointed toward the bottom corner. Every form contained a tiny administrative code. 3 letters, MHC. Ben frowned. MH Central? Daniel nodded slowly. Looks that way. Emma looked at the code again. MHC Central. The mysterious destination from the deleted emails. Now printed on paper years before anyone had erased the servers. It wasn't just a digital ghost. It had once been real. Emma turned another page. This one wasn't a transportation form. It was a meeting request. Attendees, Assistant District Attorney, Melissa Carter. Detective Alan Pierce. Nathan Briggs, Municipal Liaison. The final line had no name, only an employee identification number. Employee ID MH247. Ben frowned. No name. Emma shook her head. Just an employee number. Daniel typed quickly. I'll search personnel archives. An hour later Daniel returned. I found the employee number. Emma looked up. Who was it? Daniel hesitated. Nobody? What do you mean? The employee file doesn't exist. It never existed. No. It existed. For 3 years. Then every personnel record vanished. Ben rubbed his forehead. So someone erased an employee. Daniel nodded. Completely. Emma stared at the wall of documents. It wasn't just witnesses anymore. Employees were disappearing too. Someone had erased people from government records as easily as deleting emails. Ben broke the silence. How many? Daniel answered. I don't know. But I'm starting to think Nathan Briggs wasn't the only person whose identity was erased. Just before lunch, Kevin Chen walked into the archive room carrying a portable scanner. I've been looking at those backup forms. What did you find? Emma asked. They weren't copied by the archive department. Lisa frowned. How do you know? Kevin pointed toward tiny alignment marks on the paper. This copier belonged to City Hall, not the records office. So whoever made these copies did it before the files ever reached storage. Emma nodded slowly. Someone inside City Hall had secretly copied evidence. Not to destroy it, to preserve it. The question was, why? Ben examined another document. This signature. Emma walked over. What about it? It belongs to Detective Alan Pierce. Emma recognized the name. Pierce had retired nearly 6 years earlier. A respected investigator. Highly decorated. Never disciplined. Ben looked thoughtful. He's still alive. Emma met his eyes. Then we're going to talk to him. That afternoon they drove to a quiet neighborhood outside the city. Detective Alan Pierce lived alone in a small brick house surrounded by carefully trimmed hedges. An elderly golden retriever barked once before settling back onto the porch. Pierce answered the door himself. His hair was completely gray now, his shoulders slightly stooped. But his eyes remained sharp. Emma introduced herself. We're reviewing several old corruption investigations. Pierce's expression changed the instant she mentioned Nathan Briggs. For less than a second, it was almost impossible to notice. But Emma saw it. He knew exactly which case she meant. Mind if we come in? She asked. Pierce hesitated, then stepped aside. His living room walls were lined with framed commendations and retirement plaques. Ben noticed something immediately. Every plaque stopped 8 years ago. The same year Nathan Briggs disappeared. Emma sat opposite him. We found your name in several witness scheduling documents. Pierce looked down. I figured someone eventually would. Emma leaned forward. Can you tell us about MHC? The color drained from Pierce's face. For several long seconds, he didn't speak. Finally, he whispered, You shouldn't be asking that. Emma kept her voice calm. Why? He looked toward the window before answering. Because people who ask about MHC have a habit of disappearing. The room fell completely silent. Emma watched Pierce carefully. He wasn't threatening them. He was warning them. Before she could ask another question, a loud engine roared outside. Ben instinctively looked through the front curtains. A black SUV rolled slowly past the house. It didn't stop. It didn't speed up. It simply continued down the quiet residential street. Pierce watched it through the window. His hands began to tremble. They know you're here. Emma looked at him. Who? Pierce's voice was barely above a whisper. They always know. The black SUV disappeared around the corner without slowing down. For several seconds, no one in the room spoke. Ben kept watching through the living room curtains. It's gone. Alan Pierce didn't seem relieved. If anything, he looked worse. His hands shook as he reached for a glass of water. Emma noticed the movement. This wasn't the nervousness of a guilty man. It was the fear of someone who had spent years waiting for the past to find him. She spoke quietly. Mr. Pierce, when was the last time you saw that vehicle? He stared at the glass in his hand. I don't know. They changed them. But there's always one. Ben turned from the window. You think they're watching you? Pierce let out a humorless laugh. I stopped wondering that years ago. Wolf Emma waited. Silence often did more work than questions. Eventually, Pierce sighed. I never worked for MHC. You didn't? No. I worked with them. Emma leaned forward. What was MHC? I don't know what the letters stood for. They never told us. They just appeared. Ooh. The liaison officers. Every major corruption case involving city contracts eventually had one. Ben frowned. What did they do? They coordinated witnesses. Transportation. Security. Paperwork. Were they police officers? No. Federal? I don't think so. City employees. They carried City Hall credentials. Emma asked the question that mattered most. Did you trust them? Pierce looked away. At the time, yes. He stood and walked toward an old filing cabinet in the corner of the room. I've spent 8 years trying to forget those cases. He unlocked the bottom drawer. Most of it contained retirement papers and personal documents. From the back, he removed a small notebook. Its leather cover had faded with age. I wasn't supposed to keep this. Emma accepted it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes. Case numbers, meeting dates, witness names. Nothing extraordinary. Then she reached a page marked Assist Nathan Briggs. Below the name were only 3 lines. Ours transportation confirmed. Us witness collected Thursday 7:30 hours delivered 0824 hours. Emma looked up. Delivered where? Pierce shook his head. I never knew. You never asked. I did. What did they tell you? They said the location was classified. Ben looked skeptical. And you accepted that? Pierce looked ashamed. We were told the witnesses would be safer if fewer people knew. Emma understood. It sounded reasonable. At least back then. T2 back at headquarters. Daniel Mercer scanned every page of Pierce's notebook. Most entries confirmed information they already knew. Pickup times, meeting schedules, court appearances. Then one line caught his attention. Emma. She walked over. What is it? Daniel enlarged a page. Beside Nathan Briggs' entry was a handwritten note. Lobby camera confirmed. Emma frowned. Lobby camera. Daniel nodded. I think he's referring to surveillance. We're. The City Hall Annex. Kevin Chen looked up from across the room. If that's true, there might still be archived footage. Ben laughed softly. After 8 years. Kevin shrugged. You'd be surprised what cities forget to delete. By late afternoon, Kevin had gained access to the city's archived surveillance servers. The footage quality was poor, grainy, low resolution, but usable. Emma, Ben, Daniel, and Lisa gathered around the monitor. Kevin typed in the date from Pierce's notebook. There. A hallway appeared. Timestamp 7:58 a.m. and employees walked through metal detectors. Visitors checked in at reception. Nothing unusual. Kevin fast-forwarded. At FRCAO 3M, Nathan Briggs entered the building. Emma immediately recognized him from the family photographs. Blue work jacket, steel toe boots, lunch cooler in one hand. A man expecting to testify, not disappear. Ben leaned closer. He looks calm. Nathan even smiled briefly at the security guard before disappearing down the hallway. Kevin paused the video. This camera covers the only public entrance. Emma nodded. Keep going. The footage continued. Minutes passed. Employees came and went. Lawyers entered. Maintenance workers pushed supply carts. The timestamp advanced 8:30, 900, 1000. No Nathan. Ben frowned. Maybe another exit. Kevin shook his head. This building only had one public entrance. What about staff exits? They all passed cameras too. Emma folded her arms. Check them. For the next hour they watched every available angle. Loading dock, parking garage, Rear hallway. Emergency stairwell. Nothing. Nathan Briggs entered the building. He never appeared leaving it. The room fell silent. Lisa finally spoke. That's impossible. Kevin nodded slowly. I know. Emma looked at the building blueprint displayed beside the video feed. Unless... Daniel finished her thought. He never left. Kevin continued searching. Let's look at Linda Carver. Another archive loaded. Different year. Different camera. Different building. Again, Linda entered. Professional clothes. Briefcase. Coffee in one hand. She greeted the receptionist. Walked toward the elevators. Never appeared again. Ben exhaled slowly. No. Kevin loaded Anthony Ruiz. Exactly the same. Entered. Never exited. Grace Whitmore. Entered. Never exited. 4 witnesses. 4 different years. 4 different buildings. 4 people walking calmly into government offices. None walking out. Emma stared at the frozen image of Nathan Briggs smiling at the security guard. She felt the investigation shift beneath her feet. Up until now, they had believed the witnesses disappeared before reaching court. That wasn't true. They made it. At least as far as City Hall. Daniel enlarged the security footage. Wait. He zoomed in on the timestamp. There was a gap. Only 3 seconds. Emma looked confused. What am I looking at? Kevin frowned. The recording skipped. System glitch. Daniel shook his head. No. He overlaid the video timeline. The timestamps continue normally. But 3 seconds of actual footage are gone. Ben stared at the screen. You can do that. Kevin answered. If someone edited the archive. Emma's eyes narrowed. So somebody removed exactly 3 seconds. Daniel nodded. Professionally. Not enough for anyone to notice. What? Kevin restored the system log attached to the footage. Most of it was routine. Automatic backups. Scheduled maintenance. Camera diagnostics. Then one administrative entry appeared. Fraser's archive modified Ususira CITY AMN04 year, and Emma looked at Daniel. The same account. He nodded. The same one that deleted the emails. The same invisible administrator had altered surveillance footage years before erasing the records. Not only had someone intercepted witnesses, they had rewritten history. Frame by frame. Lisa studied the blueprint again. Emma. She pointed to one section of the building. This hallway. What about it? It isn't on the surveillance map. Kevin looked closer. You're right. There should be another camera. But the archive doesn't contain it. Daniel searched the maintenance records. There was a camera. When? Installed 6 months before Nathan disappeared. What happened? Daniel read the maintenance note. Camera removed during renovation. Emma frowned. What renovation? Kevin searched the building permits. Nothing. No renovation permit. No construction approval. No contractor invoice. No budget request. The camera had officially been removed. During renovations that had never happened. Emma stood in front of the investigation board. She added 4 new photographs. Each showed a witness entering a government building. Beneath them, she pinned one sentence. Says no f otegi exs. She stepped back. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. Every witness had willingly entered a government facility. Every digital trail ended inside those walls. Someone inside the system had intercepted them before they ever reached a courtroom. Emma stared at Nathan's smiling face on the board. For the first time since the investigation began, she stopped wondering whether he had been murdered. Instead, a far more disturbing question entered her mind. If Nathan Briggs never walked out of City Hall, then where had they taken him? Monday morning began with a simple question. If 4 witnesses had disappeared before testifying, who had benefited? Emma already knew the answer. Sloan Infrastructure. The company appeared in every case file they'd examined, sometimes as the primary defendant, sometimes as a subcontractor, sometimes buried 3 or 4 layers deep in city contracts. But somehow, it was always there. Daniel projected a timeline onto the conference room wall. 20 years of construction projects stretched across the screen. High-rise apartments, schools, bridges, government offices, parking garages, redevelopment zones, nearly every major public project in the city. A single blue line connected them all. Sloan Infrastructure. Ben whistled softly. I knew they were big. I didn't know they were this big. Daniel nodded. They've won nearly 40% of all municipal construction contracts over the last 15 years. Emma studied the chart. What about lawsuits? Daniel clicked another tab. 30. 2 civil lawsuits. 9 criminal investigations. 0 convictions. Ben frowned. That's statistically ridiculous. Lisa looked up from her notes, especially in construction. Hep and Chen entered carrying another stack of files. I checked campaign finance records. Emma smiled faintly. I'm guessing Sloan donates a lot. Kevin nodded. A lot. He laid the documents across the table. City council, mayoral campaigns, county commissioners, building oversight committees, public infrastructure initiatives. They donate to everyone. Ben flipped through the records. All legal. So far. Kevin pointed to one line. Except this. A consulting firm called Hollow Creek Strategies had received nearly $12 million over 7 years. What do they consult on? Emma asked. Kevin shrugged. Nobody knows. No employees? No office? No website? Lisa looked up. A shell company. Kevin nodded. Looks like it. Emma drove to Sloan Infrastructure's headquarters that afternoon. The building dominated an entire city block. Glass. Steel. Perfect landscaping. A fountain stood in front of the entrance. Employees in business suits crossed the lobby carrying laptops and coffee. Everything about the place projected success. Ben glanced upward. They're not exactly hiding. No. Emma stepped through the revolving doors. They don't think they have to. The receptionist greeted them politely. Good afternoon. Emma displayed her badge. Would like to speak with Mr. Victor Sloan. I'm sorry, Mr. Sloan is in a board meeting. We can wait. The receptionist smiled professionally. I'll let his office know. Within minutes, a man in an expensive navy suit approached. He extended his hand confidently. Detectives. My name is Andrew Keller, General Counsel for Sloan Infrastructure. Emma shook his hand. We're conducting a review of several historic investigations involving your company. Keller smiled. We've cooperated with every investigation for decades. I'm sure. What would you like to know? The interview room overlooked downtown. Everything inside felt carefully designed. Modern artwork, fresh flowers, expensive furniture. Nothing personal. Emma opened her notebook. I'm looking into 4 former witnesses. Nathan Briggs, Linda Carver, Anthony Ruiz, Grace Whitmore. Keller listened without changing expression. I remember some of those names. Emma noticed the wording. Some, not all. What can you tell us? They worked on projects connected to us. Were they employees? No. Contractors. Did your company have any contact with them after criminal charges were filed? No. You never attempted to speak with them? Absolutely not. Emma watched his eyes. No hesitation. No nervousness. Either he was telling the truth, or he'd practiced the answers many times. 2. Ben placed 4 photographs on the table. These people disappeared before testifying. Keller glanced down. I'm sorry to hear that. You hadn't heard? No. Emma leaned forward. You never wondered why 4 witnesses connected to your company vanished? Keller smiled politely. Detective. Our company manages thousands of contracts every year. I couldn't possibly keep track of every witness in every investigation. Technically, it was a reasonable answer. Emma hated reasonable answers. They were often the hardest to disprove. The meeting ended exactly 32 minutes after it began. Professional. Courteous. Completely unproductive. As Emma and Ben walked toward the parking garage, Ben sighed. That was a waste of time. Emma shook her head. No? What did we learn? They've rehearsed. Ben thought about it. Every answer. Exactly. Back at headquarters, Daniel looked up as they entered. I've got something. Emmett something. I was hoping you'd say that. He rotated his monitor. I searched employee records. For Sloan. No. For former Sloan employees. Specifically anyone who quit within 6 months of those witnessed disappearances. Ben raised an eyebrow. Find anything? Daniel nodded. One person. He pulled up a personnel file. Guess Michael Donovan, former project supervisor. Resigned suddenly. No employment afterward. No pension. No professional license renewals. Emma frowned. He disappeared too. Daniel nodded slowly. Almost. What do you mean? He still exists, but barely. No credit activity. No property. No vehicle registration. No tax filings. Nothing after resigning. Daniel searched for the right word. Went quiet. An hour later, Emma and Ben sat across from Michael Donovan in a small diner outside the city. He had agreed to meet only after Emma promised the conversation wouldn't take place over the phone. He looked nervous from the moment he arrived. Every few minutes, he glanced through the restaurant windows. Emma noticed. Are you expecting someone? No. But I always check. You've been doing that for a while. Michael gave a weak smile. 8 years. Emma placed her badge beside her coffee. We're reopening the Briggs investigation. Michael's face lost all color. I knew this day would come. Ben leaned forward. You knew Nathan Briggs. Michael nodded. He was a good man. What happened to him? Michael stared into his untouched coffee. I don't know. Emma let the silence stretch. Finally he spoke again. I wish I did. What do you know? Emma asked. Michael looked around the diner once more, then lowered his voice. There were rumors. What kind of rumors? If you agreed to testify, people came to see you. Ooh? I never knew. What did they want? They said they were protecting witnesses. Emma exchanged a quick glance with Ben. Were they from MHC? Michael's head snapped upward. Who told you that name? Emma didn't answer. Michael leaned back slowly. I haven't heard those initials in years. So they're real. The nodded reluctantly. They're real? What are they? I honestly don't know. I never met them. But everyone at Sloan knew the initials. What did they mean? He shook his head. No idea. People only whispered about them. Emma studied him carefully. He wasn't lying. He looked genuinely terrified. Why did you leave Sloan? Michael's breathing became shallow. Because I saw something. What? He hesitated, then looked directly at Emma. I watched Nathan Briggs get into a black SUV. Emma froze. When? The morning he disappeared. Where? Outside the City Hall annex. Who was with him? Michael closed his eyes. I couldn't see. The windows were tinted. Were there police officers? I don't know. Federal agents? I don't know. What made you remember it? Michael swallowed hard. Because Nathan looked. He searched for the word, confused. Emma leaned closer. Confused how? He wasn't resisting, wasn't frightened, but he kept looking back at the courthouse. As if Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. He suddenly realized he wasn't going where he'd been promised. The room fell silent. That single sentence changed everything. Nathan hadn't willingly disappeared. He'd willingly accepted protection and to realize, too late, that the people picking him up weren't taking him to safety. Emma carefully closed her notebook. You've never told anyone this? Michael shook his head. I tried. What happened? The next morning, his voice trembled. Someone was sitting in a car outside my house. Did they threaten you? No. They didn't have to. Emma looked at him steadily. So you quit. I resigned that afternoon. And you've been looking over your shoulder ever since. Michael nodded. I figured if they wanted me, they'd come eventually. Emma stood. We're going to keep you safe. For the first time since she'd met him, Michael smiled. It wasn't relief. It was sadness. You sound just like they did. Emma stopped. What? He looked her directly in the eyes. The men who took Nathan. They promised. They were taking him somewhere safe too. The drive back to headquarters was unusually quiet. Ben kept replaying Michael Donovan's final words in his mind. They promised they were taking him somewhere safe too. It fit everything then covered. The recovered emails. The transportation schedules. The forged farewell letter. The missing surveillance footage. None of the witnesses had been forced into a vehicle. They had climbed in willingly, because they believed they were being protected. Emma finally broke the silence. Michael isn't our witness. Ben looked over. What do you mean? As important. But he never saw what happened after Nathan got into the SUV. So who is? Emma looked through the windshield. Someone who worked inside the system. But back at Major Crimes, Daniel had already begun referencing everyone connected to the 4 original corruption cases. Judges, court clerks, police officers, building inspectors, city engineers, administrative assistants. The list stretched past 200 names. Kevin looked up from his workstation. I think we've been asking the wrong question. Emma walked over. What question? We've been asking who took the witnesses. He pointed at the screen. We should be asking who always knew where they would be. Emma studied the list. Only a handful of people had advanced knowledge of witness schedules. The assigned prosecutor, the lead detective, a court administrator, and 1 city employee listed only as CES Municipal Liaison. I said again, no name, just a title. Ben frowned. Same position as the backup documents. Daniel nodded. Different people signed the paperwork. But every case had a municipal liaison. Emma looked at Kevin. Can you identify them? I've been trying. And they don't exist anymore. Lisa Grant entered carrying another archive box. I found something from the Building Safety Division. Emma opened the folder. Inside were employee evaluations. Most were routine. Then one name caught her eye. Frank Holloway, Senior Building Inspector. Retired 3 months after Nathan Briggs disappeared. Ben looked up. Related to Councilman Holloway. Daniel checked immediately. First cousin. The room grew quiet. Lisa continued reading. Frank Holloway inspected nearly every Sloan infrastructure project involved in our investigation. Emma nodded slowly. I think we need to talk to him. Nifl Frank Holloway lived alone in a small farmhouse nearly an hour outside the city. The property sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by open fields. An old pickup truck rested beneath a rusted carport. A weathered mailbox leaned slightly toward the road. Ben looked around. Not exactly the lifestyle of a corrupt inspector. Emma agreed. Maybe. Or maybe someone paid him well enough to retire early. They pulled into the driveway. The front door stood slightly open. Emma's instincts sharpened immediately. She quietly placed a hand on her holstered weapon. Frank Holloway. No answer. Ben drew his service pistol. The 2 detectives approached slowly. The screen door creaked in the afternoon breeze. Inside, the house was silent. Too silent. Emma pushed the door open. Police. No response. The living room looked ordinary. A television. Bookshelves. A half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then Emma noticed the coffee. Still warm. She touched the mug. It hasn't been long. Ben nodded. He was here. He's here. They cleared the kitchen. Then the hallway. Finally the study. Desk drawers had been pulled open. File folders covered the floor. Someone had searched the room carefully. Not violently. Professionally. Emma crouched beside the desk. They weren't looking for valuables. Ben picked up a silver watch lying on the floor. They left cash too. Whoever had entered the house had ignored everything except documents. Lisa's voice crackled over Emma's radio. I've got CSU about 15 minutes away. Emma answered. Tell them to move. Ben, opened the back door. Fresh tire tracks crossed the soft dirt behind the house. 2 vehicles. One belonged to Frank's pickup. The other Prasra, a larger SUV. Emma photographed the impressions. They're fresh. Desh? Ben looked toward the tree line. No signs of a struggle. Emma wasn't convinced. She followed a series of faint footprints across the yard. They stopped near the driveway, as if someone had climbed willingly into another vehicle. Her stomach tightened. It was happening again. Inside the study, Emma noticed something else. A framed photograph had fallen face down beside the desk. She picked it up. Frank Holloway stood beside a group of inspectors at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Behind them, a younger Victor Sloan smiled for the cameras. Emma slipped the photograph into an evidence bag. Ben searched the desk once more. Emma, she turned. I found his phone. It lay beneath the desk chair. The screen was cracked. Not from age. From impact. Daniel joined them through a secure video call. Power it on. Ben pressed the button. Nothing. Battery's dead. Daniel shook his head. No. It was wiped. Emma frowned. Wiped. Completely. The operating system is gone. Ben stared at the phone. You can do that remotely. Daniel's expression was grim. If you have the right software. 40 minutes later, crime scene technicians arrived. Lisa walked slowly through the study. No blood. No signs of violence. No defensive damage. Emma folded her arms. So he left voluntarily. Lisa looked around again. I don't think so. What makes you say that? Lisa pointed toward the bookshelf. One section contained a perfect rectangle free of dust. There was a box here. Emma nodded. Someone took it. Lisa continued. And Frank took his coffee to the study. He expected to come right back. Tika, Daniel called again. I recovered something from Frank's cloud backup. Emma's eyes widened. He used cloud storage. Apparently. What did you find? An appointment. Daniel enlarged the calendar entry. A meeting 2 p.m.'s location residencies. Regarding Briggs' investigation, Ben checked his watch. What time is it? Emma looked. 2:21. Daniel's voice became very quiet. Emma, they got there before you did. The realization hit everyone at once. Someone had known Frank had agreed to talk. Someone had reached him first. Ben looked around the silent farmhouse. We missed him. And Emma closed her eyes briefly. By minutes, maybe less. As crime scene continued processing the house, Lisa stepped into the garage. Something caught her attention. An old metal trash can stood in the corner. Inside, only ashes. She sifted carefully with a gloved hand. Most of the papers had burned completely. Almost. One corner had survived. She carefully lifted it with tweezers. A company letterhead remained visible. FSNCOAENFRSDRUTURECR below it. Only 2 readable words. As foundation pour, Lisa immediately bagged the fragment. She hurried back inside. Emma looked at the burned paper. Foundation pour. Lisa nodded. It's all that's left. Emma stared at the evidence bag. She didn't know it yet. But those 2 words would eventually uncover the darkest secret hidden beneath the city. For now, all she knew was this retired building inspector had finally agreed to speak. And someone had arrived just ahead of the police. Again, as Emma stood on the farmhouse porch, watching the sun disappear behind the fields, one thought refused to leave her mind. Whoever they were chasing, they weren't reacting to the investigation anymore. They were staying one step ahead of it. The evidence bag sat in the center of the conference table. Inside was a burned fragment of paper. Most people would have dismissed it. 2 words survived the fire. Ishtish Foundation, pour is was. Emma had learned long ago that major investigations sometimes turned on the smallest details. She looked around the room. Let's forget witnesses for a minute. Ben frowned. What? I want to know why someone burned paperwork about concrete. Daniel enlarged the document fragment on the main screen. Only the upper corner remained intact. All ANIIFRAS star used to you below it, a foundation pour. The date had been destroyed. The project name was gone. The address was missing. Kevin examined the scan. There's something underneath the burn. He adjusted the image contrast. Faint numbers began to appear. 1804. Ben leaned closer. A project code. Maybe. Daniel nodded. Or a permit number. For the next 3 hours, the team searched every Sloan infrastructure project completed over a 15-year period. Schools. Libraries. Parking structures. Government offices. Hundreds of concrete foundation pours. Nothing connected directly to Nathan Briggs. Emma stood and walked toward the whiteboard. What are we assuming? Ben answered. That the burned document belonged to the Briggs investigation. Emma nodded. And what if it didn't? The room became quiet. Lisa looked up. You think Frank Holloway kept other files? I think Frank knew something. And somebody burned everything before we got there. Emma circled one phrase on the board. A sits for UND8IONPUR. It doesn't have to be Nathan. It just has to matter. Late that afternoon, Kevin pushed away from his computer. I've got something. Everyone looked up. I searched building inspection schedules instead of construction permits. Emma smiled. Different angle. Kevin nodded. Most concrete foundations receive 2 inspections, before the pour, and after curing. He clicked another spreadsheet, but not these. A list of 12 projects appeared. Every one had only a single inspection. No final inspection. Ben asked. Kevin shook his head. Officially, the final inspections were waived. Emma frowned. By who? Kevin enlarged one signature. Frank Holloway. Lisa looked at Emma. The inspector whose house was searched. Emma slowly nodded. Keep going. Daniel overlaid another map. The 12 construction sites spread across the city. At first glance they appeared random. Then Emma noticed something. They form a corridor. Ben looked closer. Running from the industrial district to the riverfront redevelopment zone. Every project sat within a few miles of another. Daniel highlighted a second later. The 4 witnesses had all worked somewhere along that same corridor. Nathan Briggs, demolition foreman. Linda Carver, structural engineer. Anthony Ruiz, concrete supplier. Grace Whitmore, project accountant. Each connected to a different construction site, each along the same route. Emma felt a chill. This wasn't one project. It was an entire redevelopment program. Lisa returned to Frank Holloway's recovered notebook. Most pages contained inspection notes, measurements, permit numbers, concrete strengths. Then she found something unusual. One page had been folded tightly into the binding, as if Frank had hidden it from casual view. She unfolded it carefully. Instead of inspection notes, it listed dates. Only dates. Each followed by a single handwritten letter. Reiki's Ben frowned. What does P mean? Nobody answered. Then Daniel looked at the map. The concrete pours. Emma turned. What? The dates. He quickly compared them against construction records. Every handwritten date matched the day concrete foundations had been poured. Exactly. Lisa looked back at the notebook. There are 12 dates. Emma counted silently. 12 pours. 4 missing witnesses. The numbers didn't fit. Not yet. Ben leaned back in his chair. What if P doesn't stand for pour? Daniel shook his head. It has to. Emma wasn't convinced. No. Think bigger. She looked at Frank's final notebook entry. No explanation. No address. No project number. Just one letter. If Frank wanted to remind himself, why write only one letter? Lisa thought for a moment. Unless he already knew what it meant. Emma nodded. Exactly. E22 at 6 that evening, Kevin called everyone into digital forensics. I recovered something from an old GPS database. Emma looked surprised. GPS. City inspection vehicles. He displayed a route taken by Frank Holloway nearly 8 years earlier. Most of it matched his inspection schedule. Until one evening. Instead of driving home, Frank spent nearly 40 minutes parked beside an abandoned warehouse near the river. Ben frowned. There wasn't a project there. Kevin nodded. There wasn't supposed to be. Emma looked at the satellite image. The warehouse sat directly beside one of the redevelopment sites on their map. What happened there? Daniel searched city records. Nothing. No permits. No inspections. No complaints. No recorded activity. Lisa smiled faintly. That's impossible. Warehouses don't disappear from paperwork. The following morning, Emma and Ben drove to the riverfront. The abandoned warehouse stood behind a rusted chain-link fence. Broken windows overlooked cracked pavement. Weeds pushed through the concrete. The place looked forgotten. Emma climbed through an opening in the fence. Inside, silence. Dust covered everything. Old machinery sat where workers had left it years before. Ben swept his flashlight across the floor. Nothing. Emma wasn't looking at the machinery. She was looking at the ground. One section of the concrete looked newer than the rest. Only slightly. Enough that most people would never notice. She crouched, ran her fingers across the surface. Smooth. Too smooth. Lisa, who had joined them with crime scene equipment, walked over. You see it too. Emma nodded. The finish is different. Lisa measured the slab. About 20 feet wide. No visible repairs. No utility access. No drain. Ben looked around. So why pour fresh concrete inside an abandoned warehouse? Nobody answered. Because none of them had a good explanation. Lisa unpacked a handheld concrete density scanner. It wasn't designed to find bodies. It measured structural consistency. She slowly passed it over the slab. The readings remained steady. Then, the device chirped. Lisa stopped. She scanned the same section again. Another alert. Emma looked at her. What is it? The density changes right here. Could be rebar. Could be air pockets. Could be old repairs. Ben asked quietly. Or. Lisa looked at the slab. Or something was placed underneath before the concrete cured. The warehouse fell silent. Emma stared at the floor. For the first time since reopening the investigation. She wasn't imagining what might have happened. She was standing above a place where answers could literally be buried. Back at headquarters, Emma requested authorization for ground-penetrating radar. The request moved through the system faster than expected. Too fast. Within 30 minutes, her phone rang. Captain Howard Reynolds. Yes, sir? I've reviewed your request. And it's denied. Emma frowned. On what grounds? Insufficient evidence. She looked through the glass wall of her office at the investigation board. We have altered surveillance footage. Forged documents. Missing witnesses. Destroyed records. A pause. Then the captain answered quietly. My hands are tied. The line went dead. Emma slowly lowered the phone. Ben walked into her office. Bad news. She nodded once. No radar. Ben looked toward the evidence board. So what now? Emma stared at the map of the 12 foundation pours. Then she picked up her car keys. If they won't let us look beneath the concrete. She headed toward the door. We'll find another way. Emma didn't go home. Neither did Ben. By the time the city skyline disappeared into the darkness, they were still sitting in the major crimes conference room, staring at the 12 locations marked across the map. Captain Reynolds had denied the request for ground-penetrating radar. Officially, the evidence wasn't strong enough. Unofficially, Emma wasn't convinced that was the real reason. Ben broke the silence. So we ask again tomorrow. Emma shook her head. No. You think he'll change his mind? No. Ben leaned back. Then what? Emma looked at the map. We don't need permission to learn more about the ground. The next morning, Kevin Chen walked into the room carrying a tablet. I've been thinking about those construction sites. Emma looked up. What did you find? I started comparing engineering reports. Not permits. Not inspections. Engineering surveys. Ben frowned. Why? Kevin placed the tablet on the table. Because engineers document the ground before construction begins. So, If something unusual was already underground, it would show up. For the next hour, the team studied soil reports from all 12 projects. Most were exactly what they expected: clay, gravel, compacted soil, groundwater. Then Daniel stopped scrolling. Hold on. He enlarged one report. Riverfront Redevelopment Phase 3. A handwritten note had been added in blue ink. The unexpected subsurface anomaly. Emma leaned closer. What does that mean? Lisa answered. It means they found something underground before construction. What? Lisa shrugged. The report should say. She flipped to the next page. There wasn't one. The report ended abruptly. Daniel searched the digital archive. No continuation. The document just stops. Emma smiled without humor. Another missing page. Ben stood. I'm starting to hate paperwork. Emma smiled faintly. Paperwork is telling us exactly where to look. By mid-morning, Lisa had contacted a retired geotechnical engineer named Carl Benton. He had worked on several city redevelopment projects before retiring 5 years earlier. When Emma explained what they were investigating, Carl was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. I remember that report. Emma exchanged a glance with Ben. You do. I remember being told to forget it. To me, Carl agreed to meet them at the warehouse. He arrived carrying a worn leather field notebook and a measuring stick that looked older than some detectives on the force. He walked slowly across the warehouse floor, then stopped over the newer section of concrete. I knew it. Emma stepped beside him. You've been here before. Once. 8 years ago. What happened? Carl looked at the floor. We drilled test cores before construction. What did you find? Something that shouldn't have been there. Ben asked, what? And Carl shook his head. I never found out. The next morning I was told my report contained an equipment error. And did it? Carl looked directly at Emma. No. Lisa unpacked her concrete scanner again. Carl watched carefully. It won't tell you what's underneath. No. Lisa agreed. But it will tell us whether this slab was poured all at once. She slowly moved the scanner across the concrete. The readings remained steady. Until the center. The machine chirped. Again. Carl frowned. That's not right. What do you see? Emma asked. The density changes. Lisa nodded. It matches yesterday. Carl pointed toward one corner. Scan there. Lisa did. Nothing. Now the middle. The machine immediately alerted again. Carl took a slow breath. This slab wasn't poured evenly. Emma looked toward the far wall. If something was buried though too, would the concrete settle differently? Carl nodded. Eventually. But not always. It depends on what's underneath. Ben asked quietly. Would you notice from the surface? Carl looked around the warehouse. Not after 8 years. Emma stepped outside to make another call. This time she wasn't calling her captain. She called the county prosecutor. Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter. The same prosecutor whose recovered emails had mentioned witness security. Melissa answered immediately. Emma, I need an emergency excavation order. There was a pause. For what? Emma explained everything. The warehouse. The missing engineering report. The altered inspections. The concrete anomalies. When she finished, Melissa sighed. I'll be honest. It isn't enough. Emma closed her eyes briefly. I know. But if I'm right, Melissa interrupted gently. If you're right, we'll be digging up half the city. For 3 hours later, Emma stood outside the warehouse watching heavy clouds gather overhead. A single county vehicle pulled into the parking lot. Melissa Carter stepped out. She walked slowly around the concrete slab. Carl explained his findings. Lisa demonstrated the scanner. Daniel showed the missing engineering report. Kevin displayed the altered inspection records. Melissa listened without interrupting. Finally, she looked at Emma. I still don't have enough for a warrant. Nodded. I figured. Melissa continued. I might have enough for a limited engineering assessment. Ben looked up. Meaning, no excavation, no demolition, but I can authorize ground-penetrating radar. Emma finally allowed herself a small smile. The radar team arrived shortly before sunset. 2 technicians rolled a compact scanning unit across the warehouse floor. Everyone watched the monitor. Dark lines slowly formed beneath the slab. Pipes, old foundations, utility conduits, exactly what Lisa expected. The scan continued. Nothing unusual. Ben looked at Emma. This can't be right. And Emma didn't answer. The technician completed a second pass, then a third. Same result, no large cavities, no obvious graves, no hidden rooms. Nothing. The lead technician looked up. I'm sorry. The slab appears structurally normal. Silence settled over the warehouse. Months of investigation, and the concrete had revealed nothing. Outside, rain began falling. Ben kicked a loose stone across the parking lot. So that's it? Emma stared back at the warehouse. No. What do you mean? She pointed toward the scanner. It proved something. Ben frowned. It proved there's nothing there. And Emma shook her head. No. It proved someone wanted us to believe this was the place. Ben looked confused. You think we've been chasing the wrong site? Emma nodded slowly. Frank Holloway burned 1 document. Not 12. He wanted us to find something. But not necessarily here. As the radar team packed their equipment away, Carl Benton remained standing inside the warehouse. He hadn't moved for several minutes. Lisa noticed. You all right? Carl didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed toward the radar monitor. Can I see the survey again? The technician replayed it. Carl watched silently. Then he frowned. That's strange. Emma walked over. What? The Carl pointed near the edge of the display. Why didn't you scan beyond this line? The technician looked surprised. Because that's where the warehouse ends. Carl shook his head. No. He walked to the far wall, placed his hand against the aging brick. This wasn't always the exterior wall. Everyone looked at him. What do you mean? Emma asked. Carl smiled grimly. I worked on this building. He tapped the brick. 8 years ago. There was another loading bay on the other side. The room fell silent. Emma slowly turned toward the wall. If this used to be open, Carl nodded. Then your radar never scanned the original foundation. Daniel pulled up an old satellite image. There it was. The warehouse had once extended nearly 30 feet farther. The loading bay had been demolished years earlier. A new brick wall had been built, shortening the building. The area beyond it now sat beneath an empty gravel lot. Emma stared at the image. They hadn't searched the wrong location. They had searched only half of it. The old satellite photograph changed everything. For nearly a week, the investigation had focused on the warehouse floor. Nobody had questioned the building itself. 8 years earlier, the structure had extended another 30 feet toward the river. The original loading bay was gone. A brick wall now stood where large steel doors had once opened. Beyond it, an empty gravel lot. Emma stared at the image pinned to the investigation board. We've been standing in the right place. Ben nodded slowly, just on the wrong side of the wall. By sunrise, Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter had secured an expanded engineering warrant. Not an excavation warrant. Not yet. But enough to scan the gravel lot beyond the warehouse. County surveyors arrived shortly after 8. This time, Emma stood beside the radar technician as the equipment rolled across the uneven ground. The monitor remained almost empty for the first several passes. Natural soil. Utility lines. Old drainage pipes. Nothing unusual. Then, a sharp rectangular outline appeared nearly 11 feet below the surface. The technician stopped walking. Ben leaned closer. What is that? The technician adjusted the settings. The shape became clearer. Perfectly rectangular. Almost 8 feet long. Emma looked at Lisa. What could make that? Lisa didn't answer immediately. She'd spent enough years processing crime scenes to recognize what everyone else was beginning to suspect. I don't know, but it doesn't belong there. Melissa Carter stared at the monitor for several long seconds. Then she looked at Emma. You have your excavation warrant. Phew. The first shovel entered the ground just after 10 o'clock. Heavy machinery removed the top layers of gravel. Construction crews worked carefully under Lisa's supervision. Every bucket of dirt was screened, every artifact photographed, every measurement recorded. By noon, they reached the original concrete foundation. It had been poured nearly 8 years earlier, exactly as the records showed. Lisa examined the surface carefully. There. She pointed toward a section where the concrete color changed ever so slightly. Emma saw it immediately. A rectangular patch, almost invisible. Someone had cut through the foundation, then repaired it. Ben exhaled slowly. They opened it once. Lisa nodded, and wanted nobody to notice. Whoa! Concrete saws echoed across the property. The repair section was removed piece by piece. Dust filled the air. Everyone stood back. No one spoke. The opening revealed compacted soil beneath the slab. Nothing else. For a moment, Ben looked disappointed. Then one of the excavation workers called out, I've got something. The entire site went silent. Lisa climbed carefully into the excavation pit. Only a small portion was visible. A fragment of fabric, dark blue. She brushed away the surrounding soil with a soft archaeological brush. More fabric appeared. Then, bone. Human. Emma closed her eyes for a brief moment. After days of theories, the investigation had become a homicide. The recovery took nearly 4 hours. No one rushed. Every layer of soil was documented. Every photograph carefully taken. Finally, the remains were lifted from the ground. Dr. Evelyn Shaw arrived just as the recovery ended. She removed her gloves slowly before kneeling beside the evidence table. The skeleton was nearly complete. Clothing had deteriorated badly. Only fragments remained. A faded work boot still clung to one foot. Dr. Shaw examined it carefully. Construction boot. Emma nodded. Could it be Nathan Briggs? Dr. Shaw looked up. It's possible. But I'm not making that assumption. Though, the remains were transported to the medical examiner's office under police escort. The atmosphere inside the morgue was unusually quiet. Even experienced investigators understood the significance of the discovery. Dr. Shaw began her examination immediately. Emma watched from behind the observation glass. Years of experience had taught her never to interrupt Evelyn while she worked. Hours passed. Finally, Evelyn entered the conference room carrying a preliminary report. She placed it on the table. It isn't Nathan Briggs. Silence. Ben blinked. What? Dr. Shaw looked at each member of the team. The victim is male, approximately 55 years old. Nathan Briggs was 43, and Emma frowned. So who is he? Evelyn shook her head. I don't know. Daniel immediately began running the recovered fingerprints. No match. Dental records. No match. DNA databases. Nothing. The victim didn't officially exist. Ben rubbed his forehead. Another erased identity. Emma looked toward the evidence board, or someone nobody ever looked for. Dr. Shaw continued her report. The cause of death appears to be a single gunshot wound. Execution style. No defensive injuries. No fractures. No evidence of restraint. Lisa frowned. So he wasn't tortured. No. He likely never expected to die. The room became quiet again. Evelyn placed a small evidence bag on the table. We did recover one personal item. Inside lay a heavily corroded metal key. Attached to it, a faded plastic tag. Most of the lettering had worn away. Only 3 characters remained. Westby Fulniers. Ben picked up the photograph of the key. Locker. Storage unit. Apartment. Emma wasn't sure, but she knew it mattered. People rarely buried keys with victims unless they didn't know the key was there. Kevin searched city property records, hundreds of storage lockers, parking garages, Maintenance rooms. Anything designated B14. Too many possibilities. Daniel searched another angle. Let's see if B14 appears in old construction plans. For minutes passed. Then, there. Everyone looked up. The original warehouse blueprint appeared on the screen. Basement level. Maintenance corridor. Electrical room. Storage. Then, one small room labeled simply NSB Foodie Servant for Use. Emma stared at the blueprint. What's inside? Daniel zoomed in. The room sat beneath the loading bay, directly below the place where the body had been buried. Ben frowned. But the basement doesn't exist anymore. It does, Daniel replied. It was sealed when the loading bay was demolished. The room had never been removed. It had been entombed. Before anyone could leave, Kevin's computer emitted a sharp notification. I've got a database hit. Emma walked over. What is it? The victim. She frowned. I thought there wasn't a match. There wasn't. Kevin turned the monitor toward her. This isn't a fingerprint match. It's facial recognition. Everyone gathered around. An old newspaper photograph appeared. 8 years old. The man standing beside a city council member wore a suit and a visitor's badge. The article identified him as Signature's David Mercer, independent structural auditor. Emma read the caption twice. Structural auditor. Daniel nodded slowly. He inspected city construction projects. Ben looked confused. Was he connected to Sloan Infrastructure? Kevin searched again. His expression hardened. He wasn't connected. He was investigating them. The room fell completely silent. Emma looked back at the recovered remains. David Mercer wasn't one of the 4 witnesses. He wasn't on any court records. He wasn't scheduled to testify, which meant something even more disturbing. There were victims they didn't even know existed, people who had died, before anyone realized there was a conspiracy. Emma walked to the investigation board and pinned David Mercer's photograph beside the 4 missing witnesses. Then she stepped back. 5 faces now stared back at her. Only 1 had been found. 4 were still missing. But the discovery of David Mercer proved one thing beyond any doubt. They weren't searching for disappeared witnesses anymore. They were uncovering a cemetery hidden beneath the city's foundations. David Mercer changed the investigation overnight. Until now, Emma Hayes had been chasing 4 missing witnesses. Now she knew there had been others. People who had never appeared in court records. People who had never been reported missing. People whose names had quietly disappeared from history. The question was no longer whether the conspiracy existed. The question was, how many people had been erased? The medical examiner's office was unusually busy the following morning. Dr. Evelyn Shaw stood beside the examination table, studying David Mercer's skeletal remains once again. Emma entered carrying a fresh cup of coffee. You've been here all night. Evelyn smiled tiredly. So have you. Emma looked at the report lying open. You found something. I did. Evelyn carefully placed a small evidence bag on the table. Inside was a tiny metal fragment, flattened, misshapen, dark with age. The bullet. Evelyn nodded. It fragmented when it struck bone. Can you identify it? Eventually. But that's not what interests me. So she handed Emma another photograph. A close-up of David Mercer's left wrist. Despite 8 years underground, a faint impression remained in the bone, 2 narrow grooves. Parallel? What caused that? Emma asked. Evelyn folded her arms. He wore something. A watch. Nope. The marks are too close together. Handcuffs. Again, Evelyn shook her head. I don't think so. She looked directly at Emma. I think someone secured him with plastic restraints. Emma stared at the photograph. Zip ties. Quick. Cheap. Disposable. Professional. Back at headquarters, Daniel Mercer had covered an entire conference room wall with printed spreadsheets. Ben walked in carrying breakfast. What happened in here? Daniel barely looked up. I stopped searching names. Ben frowned. What are you searching? Absences. Emma joined them moments later. Daniel pointed to the first chart. I pulled employment records from every major construction project Sloan Infrastructure worked on. So, I compared them to tax records. Another chart appeared. Then driver's license renewals. Another, medical insurance. Another, retirement accounts. Emma began to understand. You aren't looking for missing people. Daniel nodded. I'm looking for people who suddenly stopped generating records. The computer processed another data set. Hundreds of names scrolled past. Most disappeared immediately. Normal employment changes. Retirement. Deaths. Relocations. Then 12 names remained. Daniel enlarged the screen. 12 construction professionals. Inspectors, engineers, safety officers, surveyors, concrete specialists. All connected to Sloan projects. Every one of them had simply stopped appearing in public records. Ben looked at the screen. Are they all dead? Daniel answered honestly. I don't know. But none of them have existed on paper for at least 7 years. Emma quietly counted. 12. The same number Frank Holloway had written beside the mysterious letterer. Lisa entered carrying Frank Holloway's notebook. I've been comparing dates. She laid the notebook beside Daniel's printout. The room became completely silent. One by one, every date in Frank's notebook matched the last confirmed appearance of one of Daniel's 12 names. Not concrete pours, not inspection dates, disappearances. Emma slowly sat down. Ben looked at her. It never meant poor, did it? Emma shook her head. None. Lisa turned another page in the notebook. At the bottom, almost hidden beneath Frank's handwriting, was a tiny penciled note they had overlooked before. Present? Daniel looked confused. Present. Emma nodded slowly. He wasn't recording construction. He was recording attendance. Ben frowned. Attendance where? Nobody answered, because they already feared the answer. Kevin Chen hurried into the room. You need to see this. He connected his tablet to the projector. I searched archived access control logs. City Hall. Kevin nodded. The old employee badge system. The Emma leaned forward. What did you find? The 12 names Daniel identified. One by one, they appeared on the screen. Each badge had been used to enter City Hall. Each on different dates. Each for scheduled meetings connected to Sloan investigations. Then, nothing. No badge exits. Ben stared at the screen. No. Kevin nodded grimly. They entered. They never badged out. Emma looked toward the investigation board. Nathan Briggs, Linda Carver, Anthony Ruiz, Grace Whitmore, David Mercer. Now 12 more names. The pattern had become impossible to ignore. Ben picked up one personnel file. Michael Donovan wasn't on this list. Daniel nodded. He never entered the building. He stayed alive. The room fell quiet. For the first time, they understood why Michael had survived. He had seen something. But he'd never stepped inside City Hall. Emma stood and began pinning the 12 photographs onto the investigation board. The wall was becoming crowded. Faces. Families. Careers, lives. Each represented by a single photograph. Each ending on a different day. When she finished, 17 faces stared back at the team. Ben exhaled slowly. This isn't a witness protection program. Emma answered quietly. No. It's an assembly line. Just after lunch, the receptionist called. Detective Hayes. Yes. There's a woman here asking for you. Name? Maria Ortega. Emma froze. The name was familiar. Daniel searched quickly. Former city accountant. The one who retired unexpectedly. Emma nodded. Send her in. Rethan's Maria Ortega entered cautiously. She looked over her shoulder twice before the conference room door closed. She clutched an old leather purse tightly against her chest. Emma noticed her trembling hands. Mrs. Ortega. Maria interrupted. I can't stay long. Emma nodded. What can you tell us? Maria looked at the investigation board. The color drained from her face. You found David. Emma exchanged a glance with Ben. You knew him. Maria nodded slowly. He warned me. What did he warn you about? Maria swallowed hard. He told me, if people from MHC ever asked me to attend a meeting, I should run. The room fell silent. Emma kept her voice calm. Did they ever ask? Maria looked down. Yes. When? 8 years ago. What happened? I never went. Why not? Maria reached into her purse. She removed an old envelope. The return address had faded with time. Across the front, someone had written in blue ink, "The SysQNFDN Tables," and Emma carefully opened it. Inside was a formal letter. Ves, you are requested to attend a confidential administrative review regarding municipal contract irregularities. Transportation has been arranged. There was no department name. No signature, only one line at the bottom. Ask Municipal Liaison Office. Emma looked up. Who sent this to you? Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know. I burned everything else. Why keep this? Maria looked toward the investigation board again. Because someday, I hoped someone would finally believe me. Before Emma could ask another question, Maria's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen. Every trace of color disappeared from her face. When is it? Ben asked. Maria slowly turned the phone toward them. The screen displayed only 4 words. You talked to no phone number, no sender. Just the message. Emma was already reaching for her radio. Lock this building down. Because for the first time since reopening the investigation, the people behind the disappearances weren't just watching. They were responding. The text message changed the atmosphere inside major crimes. Until that moment, Emma Hayes had believed the people behind the disappearances were monitoring the investigation. Now she knew something worse. They were monitoring the investigators. Uniformed officers immediately secured every entrance to the building. Kevin Chen took Maria Ortega's phone without saying a word. Can you trace it? Emma asked. Kevin connected the device to his forensic workstation. I'll try. Several minutes passed. Then he frowned. I've never seen routing like this. Ben walked over. What do you mean? The message wasn't sent from a phone. Then what sent it? Kevin enlarged the transmission log. It came through a commercial messaging gateway. Emma looked confused. So, a computer. Kevin nodded. More specifically, he zoomed in again. A server inside City Hall. The room fell silent. Maria Ortega sat quietly in interview room 2. She hadn't touched the bottle of water on the table. Emma entered alone. No recorder. No notebook. Just 2 chairs. Sometimes people spoke more freely when they didn't feel interviewed. Emma sat across from her. I need you to tell me everything. Maria nodded slowly. I've been waiting 8 years for someone to ask. That? I worked in municipal accounting. My job was simple. I approved payments after projects were completed. Emma listened carefully. Did you notice anything unusual? Maria gave a sad smile. At first, no. Sloan Infrastructure always submitted perfect paperwork. Every invoice. Every inspection. Every signature. Perfect. She paused. And that's what bothered David Mercer. Emma leaned forward. The structural auditor. Maria nodded. He said real construction projects are never perfect. Well, David Mercer had begun asking questions. Why were inspection reports identical? Why were correction notices disappearing? Why were every project's final costs adjusted by nearly the same percentage? The numbers were too clean, too consistent, too manufactured. Emma asked, what happened after he started asking? Maria looked down. He disappeared. Emma waited. Silence filled the room. Finally, Maria continued. A week later, I received an invitation. Emma already knew which one. The Municipal Liaison Office. Maria nodded. They wanted to review accounting procedures. Did you go? No. What did you do? I called David. Emma looked surprised. You reached him? Maria slowly shook her head. His voicemail. He never answered. I never heard from him again. Ben entered quietly. He held a single sheet of paper. Emma, read it. Kevin had traced the anonymous message, not to a person, to a network, one internal network. As MH sent RLs it again. The initials followed them everywhere. Maria looked at the paper. They're still using that name. Emma looked up. You've heard it before. Maria nodded. Nobody ever said it out loud, but everyone whispered it. What did they say? Maria hesitated. That if MHC scheduled a meeting or you made sure you had somewhere else to be. Cool. Later that afternoon, Daniel called everyone into the conference room. I've been reviewing old court schedules. Emma looked up. Find something. Daniel nodded. I found someone else. A photograph appeared on the screen. An older man, silver hair, judicial robes. As Judge Howard Ellis, Ben frowned. He presided over 3 of the Sloan cases. Daniel clicked another file. Actually, 7. Emma raised an eyebrow. I thought there were only 4. There were, but Sloan Infrastructure appeared in dozens of investigations. Judge Ellis handled 7 of them. What happened? Daniel sighed. He retired unexpectedly. When? 3 weeks after David Mercer disappeared. Ben looked toward Emma. I think we should talk to him. Emma nodded. If he's willing. NICU Judge Howard Ellis lived in a quiet lakeside community nearly 2 hours outside the city. His home overlooked calm water surrounded by pine trees. It looked peaceful, almost isolated. When Emma knocked, there was no answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Ben noticed movement behind a curtain. Judge Ellis. A voice answered from inside. Go away. Emma held up her badge toward the window. We're investigating Nathan Briggs. The curtain moved. Several seconds later, the front door opened. Judge Ellis looked older than his photographs. Much older. He studied Emma carefully. I wondered how long it would take. And Emma frowned. For what? For someone to reopen those cases. He stepped aside. You'd better come in. The judge's study was filled with law books and neatly organized case files. Everything reflected decades of discipline. Everything. Except one corner. Boxes had been stacked there carelessly. Untouched for years, Emma noticed immediately. Judge Ellis followed her gaze. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. What are they? The Sloan cases. Emma sat opposite him. We've uncovered evidence that witnesses disappeared before testifying. Judge Ellis closed his eyes briefly. I know. Ben leaned forward. You knew. I suspected. Why didn't you act? The old judge looked at him sadly. Because suspicion isn't evidence. Emma placed Nathan Briggs' photograph on the desk. Then David Mercer. Then the 12 additional names. Judge Ellis stared at them for a very long time. Finally, he whispered, there were more. Emma's heartbeat quickened. How many? I don't know. But every time a case reached my courtroom, someone vanished. He stood slowly and walked toward one of the old boxes. From the bottom, he removed a worn leather notebook. Unlike Frank Holloway's, this one was carefully organized. Every page contained names, case numbers, court dates. Emma opened it carefully. Near the center of the notebook, a heading caught her eye. As witnesses unable to appear, below it were 23 names. Not 4, not 12, 23. Ben stared at the list. My God. Emma slowly counted. Only 5 names matched their investigation. 18 were completely unknown. Judge Ellis lowered himself back into his chair. I started keeping that notebook because the official files kept changing. What do you mean? Emma asked. I'd review witness lists 1 week. The next week, the names would be different. Then Emma frowned. You mean amended? No. Replaced. He looked directly at her. It was as though people had never existed. Emma turned another page. At the very back of the notebook was something folded into the cover. An old business card. Cream, colored, simple. No logo, no address, only a name. Wes Richard Holloway, City Council. Ben looked up. The councilman. Judge Ellis nodded. He visited me personally. Emma kept her voice calm. What did he want? Judge Ellis smiled bitterly. He told me the city needed progress. And, he said, delays caused by unreliable witnesses threatened important redevelopment projects. Emma asked the obvious question. Did he threaten you? Judge Ellis didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the lake outside his window. Finally, he spoke. Nopu. He didn't have to. Bopu. Emma closed the notebook. This could reopen every case. Judge Ellis nodded slowly. That's why I kept it. Why give it to us now? The old judge looked at Nathan Briggs' photograph. Because after 8 years. I'm tired of pretending I don't remember their faces. As Emma carefully placed the notebook into an evidence bag, she realized something. Frank Holloway had kept notes. Judge Ellis had kept notes. Someone inside the system had always known something was wrong. They simply believed they were alone. Now those forgotten fragments were coming together. 23 names. 23 lives interrupted. And somewhere among them, the person who could finally expose MHC. Emma barely spoke during the drive back from Judge Howard Ellis's house. The leather notebook rested on the center console inside an evidence bag. 23 names. 23 court cases. 23 people who had somehow disappeared from the legal system. Ben glanced at the notebook. Think this is what Frank Holloway was trying to tell us? Emma nodded. I think Frank knew pieces of it. And Judge Ellis kept the rest. She looked out the windshield. No, we need to find the connection. Two back at Major Crimes, the entire team gathered around the investigation board. The wall had become impossible to ignore. Photographs covered nearly every inch. Witnesses, inspectors, engineers, city employees, David Mercer, Nathan Briggs, Linda Carver, Anthony Ruiz, Grace Whitmore, and now 18 additional names. Daniel carefully copied every name from Judge Ellis's notebook into a spreadsheet. Kevin immediately began searching government databases. Lisa compared court dates. Dr. Evelyn Shaw quietly reviewed death records once again. For nearly an hour, nobody spoke. Only keyboards filled the room. Daniel finally broke the silence. I've got something. Emma walked over. What did you find? I stopped looking at people. Ben smiled. That seems to be becoming a theme. Daniel nodded. I looked at money instead. He projected a financial timeline across the screen. Every Sloan infrastructure project appeared in blue. Every corruption investigation appeared in red. Every missing witness appeared in yellow. Then Daniel added one final layer. Large financial transfers. The room fell silent. Every disappearance was followed within 48 hours by a payment, not to Sloan Infrastructure, to the same consulting company Kevin had found earlier. Ace Hollow Creek Strategies. Ben frowned. The Shell Company. Kevin nodded. $12 million over 7 years. Daniel enlarged the figures. The amounts weren't identical, but they followed a pattern. $500,000. $750,000. $1.2 million. Always immediately after a witness disappeared. Emma folded her arms. So somebody got paid every time a problem went away. Kevin kept digging. The money doesn't stay there. He clicked another screen. It moves again. We're 3 different charities. Lisa looked confused. Charities. Kevin nodded, at least on paper. He opened another chart. The charities donated to community projects. Those projects hired contractors. The contractors paid consulting fees. The consulting fees returned to Hollow Creek Strategies. Ben stared at the screen. They're laundering city money. And Emma shook her head. No. She pointed to Sloan Infrastructure. They're laundering bribe money. Lisa had spent the morning studying Judge Ellis's notebook. Most pages contained only names and dates. Then she noticed something unusual. Every few pages, a small star appeared in the margin. Only 6 names had stars. She looked at Emma. I think these meant something. Emma walked over. What makes you think that? Judges don't randomly decorate notebooks. She handed it over. Emma examined the pages. Nathan Briggs wasn't marked. Neither was David Mercer. But one name stood out. Robert Haynes. The Splusk Ben checked the spreadsheet. Who's Robert Haynes? Daniel searched. Former Deputy Commissioner for Building Compliance. Emma looked up. He wasn't a witness. New. He testified. Daniel stopped typing. Against Sloan Infrastructure. The room became very quiet, unlike the others. Robert Haynes had been a government official. Coach Kevin searched employment records. Retired 9 years ago. Where does he live? I don't know. No forwarding address. No pension activity. No driver's license renewal. Ben sighed. Another ghost. Daniel wasn't listening. He kept staring at Robert Haynes's name. Then his eyes widened. Wait. He typed rapidly. I've seen this name before. A personnel record appeared. Employee Supervisor Richard Holloway. The councilman. Emma slowly looked toward the investigation board. Every path, every spreadsheet, every financial trail kept circling back to one man. Don't jump to conclusions, Ben said. Emma nodded. I know. We need evidence. Not suspicion. Not patterns. Evidence. Late that afternoon, Kevin called everyone into digital forensics. I recovered archived banking metadata. Emma frowned. I thought financial records that old were gone. The transactions are. The audit logs aren't. He enlarged a table. Every payment from Hollow Creek Strategies had been approved electronically. Most authorizations came from accounting managers, project supervisors, financial controllers, but 6 transactions required a second authorization. Each one displayed the same approval code. RHRLC Mars Bent looked toward Emma. Richard Holloway. Kevin nodded. I think so. It fits the employee numbering system. Emma remained cautious. Think isn't enough. Kevin agreed. So I verified it. He opened another archived payroll file. Employee number SCRHR Sevensenshire Councilman Richard Holloway. Nobody said a word. For weeks they had been chasing invisible departments. Deleted records. Anonymous administrators. Now, for the first time, a living public official sat directly in the middle of the financial trail. Ben paced across the room. So we bring him in. Emma immediately shook her head. No. Why not? Because he'll lawyer up before he finishes sitting down. Ben frowned. We've got financial records. We have authorization codes. We have shell companies. Emma looked at him. And none of it proves he knew witnesses were disappearing. Ben knew she was right. Circumstantial evidence wasn't enough. Not yet. Daniel quietly spoke from the back of the room. I found something else. Everyone turned. He projected another spreadsheet. Meeting schedules. Every starred name from Judge Ellis's notebook had attended one additional meeting. Unlike every other witness. These 6 people had private meetings with Richard Holloway. Not in City Hall. Not in court. At a private restaurant overlooking the river. Emma wrote the name on the board. The Riverside Club. Ben looked surprised. Still open. Kevin searched. It closed 3 years ago. What is it now? A luxury apartment building. Emma smiled faintly. Convenient. Bought just before 6 that evening. The conference room phone rang. Ben answered. His expression changed immediately. It's for you. Emma took the receiver. This is Hayes. A man's voice spoke quietly. I hear you're looking for Richard Holloway. Emma straightened. Who's this? You don't know me. But I knew David Mercer. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you know? He wasn't investigating construction. Emma frowned. What was he investigating? The man answered without hesitation. The money. Emma reached for a pen. Who are you? Hey, you'll find out. Tell me where to meet you. A long pause. Then, tomorrow, 7 o'clock. The old Riverside Club Marina. The line went dead. Ben looked at her. What was that? Emma slowly lowered the phone. The first person who's called us. Instead of us finding them. She looked toward the investigation board. David Mercer hadn't been following bodies. He'd been following money. And tomorrow, someone who knew why was finally ready to talk. Emma arrived at Major Crimes before dawn. She hadn't slept much. The anonymous phone call kept replaying in her mind. Here's David Mercer wasn't investigating construction. He was investigating the money, if that was true. Then every body, every missing witness, every erased record, had simply been protecting the financial operation behind it all. Ben walked into her office carrying 2 coffees. You still planning to meet him? Emma accepted one. Yes. Could be a trap. I know. You going anyway? She nodded once. Absolutely. Yes. At 7 o'clock sharp, the entire team assembled in the conference room. Emma stood beside the investigation board. The wall had become overwhelming. 23 missing names, financial charts, City Hall, H.C. and Tyrrell, Richard Holloway, Victor Sloan, the Riverside Club. She looked around the room. We're close. Nobody argued. They all felt it. The investigation had reached a point where the pieces no longer looked random. Someone had built a machine capable of making people disappear. And Emma had begun to understand how it worked. 2. Daniel connected his laptop to the projector. I spent most of the night rebuilding David Mercer's financial research. Emma nodded. What did he find? Daniel highlighted 3 columns. Construction contracts, consulting payments, property acquisitions. Individually, nothing looked suspicious. Together, they formed a repeating cycle. Sloan Infrastructure won a city contract. The project budget quietly increased. Money flowed into Hollow Creek Strategies. The consulting fees disappeared into 3 nonprofit organizations. The nonprofits purchased abandoned industrial properties. Months later, Sloan Infrastructure acquired those same properties for a fraction of their value. Ben stared at the screen. They're buying land with their own hidden money. Daniel nodded. And the taxpayers are funding the process. Kevin added another map. Every property purchased by the charities sat inside the same redevelopment corridor. The same corridor connected to Frank Holloway's notebook. The same corridor where David Mercer had been buried. Emma folded her arms. David wasn't chasing construction. No. He was following ownership. Mingfu, the conference room door suddenly opened. Captain Howard Reynolds stepped inside. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 men wearing dark suits. Neither displayed a badge. Neither introduced themselves. Howard looked uncomfortable. Emma. She immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? The captain took a slow breath. I've been instructed to suspend the investigation. The room went completely silent. Ben looked up sharply. By who? One of the men answered. The city attorney's office. Emma stared at him. On what grounds? The investigation exceeds the department's current authorization. Emma laughed once. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. We've uncovered multiple homicides. We have missing witnesses. We have financial fraud. The second man placed a folder on the conference table. The decision has already been made. Emma opened the folder. Inside was a formal order. Autris operation suspended pending administrative review. Every active search warrant revoked. Every evidence request frozen. Every excavation canceled. Daniel looked toward the captain. You signed this. Howard couldn't meet his eyes. I didn't have a choice. Ben stood. With respect, Captain, Nubai. Howard interrupted quietly. You need to listen. His voice had changed. It was lower, more personal. This isn't coming from City Hall. Emma looked at him carefully. Then where is it coming from? Howard hesitated. I don't know. But I've never seen pressure like this. The 2 suited men began collecting case files from the conference table. One reached for Judge Ellis's notebook. Emma stopped him. That's evidence. He looked at her calmly. It now belongs to administrative review. Nuke. It belongs to Major Crimes. Without raising his voice, the man replied, Not anymore. Lisa quietly caught Emma's attention. She pointed toward Daniel. Without speaking, Daniel understood. While everyone's attention remained focused on the confrontation, he quietly connected an encrypted drive to his workstation. One folder at a time, he began copying everything. Recovered emails, financial charts, surveillance footage, forensic reports, Judge Ellis's notebook, Frank Holloway's scans, every photograph, every document, every backup. Emma continued arguing deliberately. Buying Daniel time. You expect me to hand over a homicide investigation because somebody made a phone call. The suited man remained expressionless. You are expected to follow orders. Emma stepped closer. And if I refuse, you'll be removed from the case. Ben quietly moved beside her. Then remove both of us. Captain Reynolds closed his eyes briefly. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Emma. She looked at him. They're already preparing the paperwork. The words landed heavily. She understood exactly what he was saying. This wasn't a warning. It was an apology. Across the room, Daniel watched the progress bar crawl slowly across his monitor. 32%. 38. 44. Kevin casually rolled his chair in front of the screen, blocking the visitor's view. Lisa began gathering ordinary office files into cardboard boxes. She intentionally placed irrelevant paperwork on top. Maintenance requests, old arrest reports, budget forms, anything to delay them. One of the suited men looked toward Daniel. What are you doing? Daniel didn't hesitate. Backing up my workstation before it's re-signed. The man considered that for a moment, then nodded. Cherry on. The progress bar reached 73%. Emma finally signed the suspension order. She had no legal choice. The investigation was officially closed. The suited men immediately began placing evidence boxes onto rolling carts. Within minutes, the investigation board that had taken weeks to build was almost empty. Nathan Briggs. Gone. David Mercer. Gone. The maps, the photographs, the timelines. Removed one piece at a time. Ben watched silently. It felt like watching history being erased all over again. Exactly the way it had happened 8 years earlier. The visitors finally left. The conference room looked almost abandoned. Only empty pushpins remained on the wall. Captain Reynolds stayed behind. He closed the door quietly, then reached into his jacket pocket. Without saying a word, he slid a small key across the table. Emma frowned. What is this? Howard looked toward the hallway to make sure they were alone. Evidence storage. Locker 12. She looked back at him. I thought everything was being transferred. Howard nodded. It is. He paused. In 2 hours. Then he quietly walked out. The room remained silent. Daniel finally unplugged the encrypted drive. The copy had finished. 100%. He held up the tiny black drive between 2 fingers. They took the investigation. He smiled faintly. But they didn't take the evidence. Emma looked around the nearly empty conference room. For the first time since becoming a detective Ors, she was no longer officially assigned to the case. Which meant no reports, no supervisors, no approval requests, no restrictions. She slipped the encrypted drive into her jacket pocket, then picked up the key Captain Reynolds had left behind. If they wanted this investigation to disappear, she looked to her team. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The hallway outside Major Crimes felt strangely empty. For the first time in weeks, Emma Hayes wasn't leading an official investigation. The evidence board was gone. The files had been boxed. The search warrants had been revoked. On paper, the case no longer existed, exactly the way someone wanted it. Emma looked at the small brass key resting in her palm. Sumter Locker 12 Raptors Captain Howard Reynolds had risked his career by leaving it behind. He hadn't said what was inside. He hadn't needed to. The evidence storage room occupied the basement of police headquarters. Most detectives rarely entered it. Evidence technicians handled nearly everything. Tonight, only a single night supervisor remained on duty. He recognized Emma immediately. Detective. She held up the key. I need access to locker 12. The technician glanced at the key, then at Emma. Without asking another question, he unlocked a heavy steel door. The locker hasn't been inventoried yet. Emma nodded. I won't be long. Locker 12 sat at the end of a narrow aisle. Emma inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside wasn't a murder weapon or a box of files. It was a plain brown archive carton. Across the side, written in faded black marker, were 3 words. Dusegs Administrative Overflow Files. Ben looked inside. That's it. Emma carefully lifted the lid. At first glance, the box appeared filled with routine paperwork, old maintenance requests, discarded purchase orders, broken office equipment reports. Exactly the sort of documents nobody would ever bother stealing. Lisa smiled. That's why Reynolds hid it here. Emma nodded. The perfect place to hide something is inside something nobody wants. Back at Daniel's apartment, the team converted his dining room into a temporary command center. No police network. No department computers. Only personal laptops and the encrypted backup drive. If someone was monitoring the apartment, they'd have a much harder time finding them now. Daniel began scanning the documents from locker 12. Most were exactly what they appeared to be. Routine paperwork, until one sheet stopped him. Emma. She walked over. What is it? He rotated the document. A city payment authorization. Nothing unusual, except the invoice number had been crossed out by hand. Underneath, another number had been written in pencil. Lisa leaned closer. Why change an invoice number? Daniel smiled. You don't. You hide another document behind it. He searched the archive. The penciled number matched an entirely different transaction. A transfer of Sear Sixer of 2.4 million. Destination says Hollow Creek Strategies. Seat Bessian frowned. The shell company. Daniel nodded. But look at the approval. The authorization wasn't signed by Richard Holloway or Victor Sloan. Instead, it bore a simple internal code. AMH247. Emma immediately recognized it. The employee number. Lisa looked up. The one from the witness transportation forms. Daniel nodded slowly. The same person approved financial transfers and witness transportation. The room became very quiet. For the first time, MHC wasn't just connected to disappearances. It controlled the money too. Kevin had spent the evening rebuilding financial records using archived banking metadata. He suddenly looked up. I think I found the laundering mechanism. Emma walked over. Show me. Kevin displayed hundreds of transactions. At first, they looked random. Then he filtered them by time. Every large payment moved through the system the same way. City contract, the Sloan infrastructure, Hollow Creek Strategies, 3 charities. Commercial property purchases, the private holding companies. Back to Sloan infrastructure. Ben stared at the screen. It's a circle. Kevin nodded. The money never leaves. It just changes names. Emma studied the diagram. How much? Kevin took a slow breath. I've only rebuilt part of it. So far, about $400 million. Nobody spoke. Lisa quietly opened another folder from locker 12. Inside was a thin spiral notebook. Nothing on the cover. Only dates inside. Not names. Not addresses. Just dates. And dollar amounts. Emma frowned. A bookkeeping journal. Daniel looked closer. No. Look at the initials. Each payment ended with one of 3 letters. FC Sivar Sirar SP or Sprita looked confused. What do they stand for? Nobody knew. Kevin suddenly froze. I've seen those. Everyone looked at him. We're the charities. He opened another spreadsheet. The 3 nonprofit organizations all used internal accounting categories. Community. Relocation. Property. CRP. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Community. Relocation. Property. She looked back at the notebook. Every payment classified as FASA-ARSFers occurred within 24 hours of a witness disappearing. To Daniel quickly overlaid another timeline. Nathan Briggs disappeared, and a FIRS payment. Linda Carver disappeared. Another KRS payment. Anthony Ruiz, Grace Whitmore, David Mercer. Every disappearance generated a relocation expense. Ben whispered, they were budgeting for it. Emma nodded. They expected it. A heavy silence settled over the room. People weren't disappearing unexpectedly. Their disappearances were part of operational planning. Scheduled. Funded. Approved. Approved for. Emma stared at the notebook. Human lives. Reduced to accounting entries. 2, just after midnight, Kevin's laptop chimed. I've got something. He enlarged one final transaction. Unlike the others, this payment had never been completed. Status, pending, date 8 years earlier. Amount, what, 850,000. Classification, affair. Emma frowned. What happened? Kevin searched deeper. The payment was cancelled. Why? I don't know. Who's it connected to? Kevin opened the supporting documents. One line appeared. Recess recipient meeting did not occur. Ben looked toward Emma. Maria Ortega. Emma nodded slowly. She never attended. So the relocation payment was never processed. Lisa looked up, meaning everyone else did attend. The realization hit them all at once. The accounting system wasn't documenting travel expenses. It was documenting successful witness collections. Daniel leaned back in his chair. If this notebook exists, there has to be a master ledger. Emma looked at him. The real accounting records. The ones David Mercer was chasing. Kevin nodded. And if we find that ledger, we don't just prove corruption. We prove conspiracy. Emma walked to the apartment window. The city lights stretched across the skyline. Somewhere out there, Victor Sloan was sleeping comfortably. Richard Holloway still held public office. MHC continued to exist in the shadows. They believed the investigation had been shut down. They believed the evidence had been seized. They believed major crimes had given up. Emma allowed herself the smallest smile. For the first time, the investigation wasn't following the bodies. It was following the money. And money always left a trail. The breakthrough came just after 6 the next morning. Kevin Chen hadn't gone to bed. He sat surrounded by empty coffee cups, staring at the same spreadsheet he'd been analyzing for hours. There was something about the relocation payments that bothered him. Every completed payment ended the same way. Processed. Except one. One transaction contained an extra line, a line nobody had noticed before. Facility maintenance authorized. Kevin frowned. Facility. He immediately called Emma. 40 minutes later, the team had gathered inside Daniel's apartment. Kevin projected the transaction onto the wall. It isn't paying a person. Emma leaned closer. It's paying a location. Kevin nodded. I think relocation wasn't just accounting language. Lisa folded her arms. You think they actually had a place to keep people? I do. Ben looked skeptical. For how long? Kevin highlighted another document. Look at the maintenance schedule, monthly, utility payments, generator servicing, water delivery, HVAC inspections, all continuing for nearly 8 years. Emma felt a chill. Whatever the facility was, it was still being maintained. Daniel searched old property records connected to the payment. Most of the ownership trail had been hidden behind shell companies, but eventually, one address appeared. GRCR East River Water Treatment Annex. Ben looked confused. I've never heard of it. Lisa searched city infrastructure maps. It closed 12 years ago. Kevin shook his head. Officially, he displayed utility records, electricity consumption, water usage, internet service. All active. Emma looked around the room. A building that's been abandoned for 12 years. Shouldn't have internet. By mid-afternoon, Emma and the team parked nearly half a mile away. The East River Water Treatment Annex sat beyond a rusted security fence overlooking the river. The property looked abandoned. Broken windows, peeling paint, weeds growing through cracked asphalt. Exactly the sort of place nobody would visit twice. Ben lowered his binoculars. I don't see anyone. Emma wasn't convinced. Watch the entrance. They waited. 23 minutes passed. Nothing. Then, a white maintenance van rolled through the gate. No company logo. No license plates on the front. The driver used a keycard to unlock the gate. Lisa whispered, "Abandoned buildings don't have keycards." Kevin quietly activated a directional antenna from the surveillance van. I'm picking up Wi-Fi. Ben looked over. From inside. Kevin nodded. Encrypted network. Daniel checked another screen. And cellular repeaters. Emma looked toward the building again. Someone was definitely using it. They waited until nightfall. At 8:17 p.m., the maintenance van left. The property went dark. Emma checked her watch. Let's move. The team slipped through an opening in the perimeter fence. Lisa led the way. She noticed something immediately. Fresh tire marks. Not just one vehicle. Several. Repeatedly. The ground had been driven over too many times for an abandoned site. 2. The main entrance was locked. Kevin examined the electronic access panel. Recently upgraded. Emma raised an eyebrow. How recently? Less than 3 years. He connected a portable bypass device. 30 seconds later, the lock disengaged with a quiet click. The heavy steel door opened. The air inside was cool. Too cool. Industrial air conditioning. Lisa shined her flashlight down a long corridor. Dust covered most of the floor. Except a narrow path. Clean footprints. Regular traffic. Emma whispered, "Someone's still here." The old administrative offices stood empty. Broken desks. Discarded filing cabinets. Water stains covered the ceiling. Nothing unusual. Until Daniel stopped. This wall. Emma walked over. What about it? He knocked against the concrete. Solid. Then 2 feet farther. Hollow. Lisa immediately examined the surface. The paint doesn't match. Kevin ran a handheld thermal scanner across the wall. A faint rectangular outline appeared. Hidden beneath layers of paint. Ben smiled grimly. A door. After several minutes of searching, Lisa discovered a concealed magnetic latch. The wall quietly swung inward. Behind it, a narrow staircase descended underground. The air grew noticeably colder. Emma drew her sidearm. Police. No response. The team moved carefully. Every step epically. The staircase ended inside a brightly lit underground corridor. Everything changed instantly. The abandoned building above was a disguise. Below ground, the facility looked operational. Fresh paint. Modern security cameras. LED lighting. Electronic locks. Someone had invested millions of dollars into a place that officially didn't exist. They reached the first room. Emma slowly pushed the door open. Rows of metal beds lined the walls. Blankets folded neatly. Medical cabinets. Fresh bottled water. No people. Ben looked around. This isn't a prison. Lisa nodded slowly. It looks more like... She stopped. Emma finished the sentence. A holding facility. The next room contained lockers. Most stood open, empty. One remained locked. Kevin bypassed it. Inside, 3 neatly folded sets of civilian clothing. Wallets. Cell phones. Wedding rings. Personal belongings. Each stored inside clear evidence bags. Emma carefully picked up one driver's license. As Anthony Ruse teaser, Ben stared at the name. One of our witnesses. Emma opened another bag. Grace Whitmore. A third. Unknown. Not one of the original 4. Lisa looked around the room. They took everything. Emma nodded. If you control someone's identification, you control their life. Q2. Daniel entered from the adjoining hallway. You need to see this. At the end of the corridor stood another room. Unlike the others, its door was reinforced steel. Kevin opened it. The room inside was almost empty. 1 table. 1 chair. A video camera mounted in the corner. A microphone. The walls were covered with soundproofing panels. Ben looked around. Interview room. Emma slowly shook her head. No. She noticed printed forms stacked on the table. Each titled Voluntary Identity Relocation Agreement, Her stomach tightened. People hadn't simply disappeared. They had been forced to sign documents claiming they were leaving willingly. Before anyone could examine the papers further, a faint sound echoed down the corridor, a metallic clatter. Then, footsteps. Everyone froze. Ben whispered, "We're not alone." The footsteps stopped. Silence. Emma motioned toward the lights. Someone had switched them off. One section at a time. The corridor ahead disappeared into darkness. Kevin whispered, "They know we're here." Emergency lights flickered on, red. Dim. Just enough to see shapes moving. Emma raised her weapon. "Police! Show yourself." No answer. Only hurried footsteps retreating deeper underground. The team ran after them. The corridor twisted sharply. Another door. Already closing. Ben reached it a second too late. He shoved it open. Beyond it, an underground vehicle tunnel led toward the river. A black SUV accelerated into the darkness. Emma sprinted after it. The vehicle disappeared through a reinforced security gate that slammed shut behind it. She reached the gate and gripped the cold steel bars. Beyond them, only taillights fading into the night. Lisa slowly approached. They got away. Emma looked back toward the underground facility. The beds were still warm. The water bottles were cold. Coffee in one office was half full. Whoever operated the facility had abandoned it only minutes before the detectives arrived. Ben looked down the empty tunnel. "We missed them." Emma nodded. Again. Then Daniel's voice echoed from behind them. "Emil." She turned. He was holding a thin file folder, found beneath the interview table. Inside was a single intake form. At the top, one name. Astrid Than Briggs. At the bottom, one handwritten notation. Astrid Resvilar Street Yermesis a CTI Vidastuder. Emma stared at the page. Nathan Briggs hadn't died here. He hadn't escaped. 8 years after disappearing. Someone inside MHC still considered him alive. The words refused to leave Emma's mind. Heta Tiransfir already stiatius VTI Viders. She read the intake form again. Nathan Briggs. Intake date 8 years earlier. Status transferred. Isiva status isevrasis. Every piece of evidence had pointed toward murder. Now, the file suggested something completely different. Ben looked over her shoulder. "You think it's real?" Emma folded the document carefully into an evidence bag. "I don't know. But somebody wanted to keep track of Nathan." Lisa looked around the deserted underground facility. If he was transferred where? Nobody answered. 2 crime scene technicians arrived just after midnight. The hidden facility quickly became one of the largest forensic scenes the department had processed in years. Every room was photographed. Every fingerprint lifted. Every document cataloged. Dr. Evelyn Shaw arrived shortly afterward. She walked slowly through the dormitory. 40 metal beds, 40 lockers, a medical room, an interview room, a cafeteria. She stopped beside Emma. This wasn't temporary. Emma nodded. No. They expected people to stay here. Daniel had already begun copying the facility's computer servers. Most of the hard drives had been wiped, professionally, but one maintenance computer remained untouched, probably because nobody considered it important. Kevin connected the drive. "It's not connected to the security system." "What is it?" Emma asked. "Maintenance. Generator logs. Air conditioning. Water pumps." He smiled faintly. And whoever maintained this place was terrible at deleting history. The computer contained years of maintenance records. Generator inspections, boiler servicing, air filter replacements. Then, a work order. T-transfer elevator service required. Ben looked up. Transfer elevator. Emma frowned. There wasn't an elevator. Kevin enlarged the blueprint. The underground corridor they'd searched represented only one section of the complex. Another corridor, hidden behind a solid wall. Daniel overlaid thermal images taken by crime scene. A large empty space appeared beyond the concrete. Emma looked toward the sealed wall. "We missed half the facility." Lisa located another concealed door. This one had been locked from the inside. Kevin bypassed it within seconds. The heavy door slowly opened. Beyond it, a freight elevator, large enough for vehicles. Its control panel remained powered. Ben pressed the call button. Nothing happened. Kevin examined the display. It's parked one level below us. Emma looked at him. Can we bring it up? He nodded. Maybe. After several minutes of manually restoring power, the elevator shuddered. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the underground structure. Slowly, the platform began rising. Everyone instinctively stepped back. The doors opened. The elevator was empty, but muddy tire tracks covered the floor. Fresh. Very fresh. The lower level smelled different. Not like concrete. Like river water. The tunnel stretched nearly 200 feet beneath the facility. At the far end, a steel loading dock opened directly onto the river. Ben shined his flashlight toward the water. Boat slips. 3 of them. 2 empty. 1 still rocked gently. Emma crouched beside the dock. The ropes were wet. Someone had untied a boat recently. Very recently. They left by water. U2 Daniel found another office overlooking the dock, unlike the rooms upstairs. This one hadn't been cleaned. Papers covered the desk. Coffee still steamed from a ceramic mug. A computer monitor displayed a login screen. Kevin sat down immediately. They didn't have time. Within 2 minutes, he was inside. The database wasn't large, only a few hundred records, but every record followed the same format. E-Severs intake Esters medical evaluation, Stars ecological assessmenters transfer Emma's pulse quickened. Search Nathan Briggs. Kevin typed the name. 1 record appeared. Status Sarzers transferred and destination of Sarzers Site C. Zexen. Ben frowned. Site C. Kevin searched. No address. No coordinates. Only a transport date. 8 years earlier. Lisa searched another cabinet. Inside were dozens of patient files. Most had been shredded. 1 remained intact. Not because someone forgot it. Because it had fallen behind a filing cabinet. Emma carefully opened it. The name wasn't Nathan Briggs. It belonged to another man. Samuel Price. Occupation city surveyor. Reason for intake potential cooperative witness. Emma turned another page. A handwritten note had been added. A subject refuses relocation agreement. The following page contained only 2 words. Transfer approved. Ben looked around the office. This place wasn't killing people. Emma nodded. It was processing them. Kevin suddenly called out. Emma. She walked over. I found surveillance. Unlike the cameras upstairs, these recordings have survived. 1 clip showed the intake room, a timestamp from nearly 8 years earlier. Nathan Briggs entered. He looked exhausted, confused, but alive. A man in a business suit greeted him. No uniform, no badge. Just a calm smile. The man pointed toward a chair. Nathan sat. Another man entered carrying paperwork. For nearly 20 minutes, they talked. Nathan repeatedly shook his head. Finally, he signed something. Emma watched silently. Zoom in. Kevin enlarged the document. Too blurry to read. Then Nathan stood. A 3rd man entered. He carried a small medical case. Dr. Evelyn leaned closer. Sedation kit. The man injected something into Nathan's arm. Within seconds, Nathan struggled to stay awake. 2 employees helped him into a wheelchair. The camera followed them toward the freight elevator. Then, the recording ended. The next file was missing. No one spoke. Ben finally broke the silence. He never chose this. Emma quietly shook her head. No. They made him believe he had no other option. Daniel searched the transport database again. Site C. He tried every search term imaginable. Nothing. Then, 1 maintenance record appeared. The C fuel delivery site seeks at the destination address had been deleted, but the supplier remained. Asher Harbor Fuel Services. C. Emma looked at Kevin. Can we trace deliveries? Kevin nodded. If the company still has archives. Before anyone could leave, a weak sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Almost too quiet to hear. Ben raised his flashlight. You hear that? Silence. Then, a faint cough. Everyone looked at one another. Emma whispered, "That's not the building." The cough came again. Somewhere behind the far wall. Lisa quickly examined the concrete. There, a narrow maintenance door blended almost perfectly into the wall. Kevin forced the rusted latch open. The room beyond was barely larger than a storage closet. A single emergency light flickered overhead. An elderly man sat handcuffed to a steel pipe. His beard was long. His clothes were dirty. His eyes squinted against the flashlight. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the man slowly looked up. His voice was barely audible. "I knew." He coughed again. "Someone would eventually find this place." Emma knelt beside him. "My name is Detective Emma Hayes." The man smiled weakly. "I know. I've been waiting 8 years." Emma looked carefully at his face, then back at the intake file in her hand. Nathan Briggs. The photograph was older. The beard was new. The years had changed him. But there was no mistake. The last surviving witness had been hidden beneath the city all along. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Emma Hayes simply stared at the man sitting against the concrete wall. 8 years. 8 years of believing Nathan Briggs had vanished. 8 years of forged letters, false phone calls, fake relocation paperwork, and somehow he was still alive. Emma slowly knelt beside him. "I'm going to get these cuffs off." Nathan gave a weak nod. His wrists were scarred, not from recent injuries, from years of restraints. Lisa carefully cut away the plastic restraints that secured his ankles while Ben unlocked the rusted handcuffs fixed to the pipe. Nathan tried to stand. His legs immediately gave out. Ben caught him before he hit the floor. "You've got him." Emma looked toward Dr. Evelyn Shaw. Evelyn. She was already kneeling beside Nathan. His pulse was weak. His skin was pale. He was severely dehydrated, but alive. "Get an ambulance," Evelyn said. "Now." 10 minutes later, paramedics wheeled Nathan into an ambulance parked outside the abandoned water treatment plant. As they loaded him inside, Nathan reached weakly toward Emma. She leaned closer. His voice was barely audible. "They're leaving." Emma looked at him. "Ooh, Sloan. And Holloway?" He struggled to breathe. "They know. You found me." The ambulance doors closed. Its siren disappeared into the night. Emma stood in silence. Then she turned toward Ben. "We're out of time." Major Crimes was no longer officially assigned to the case. But Nathan Briggs changed everything. He wasn't circumstantial evidence. He wasn't a financial record. He wasn't an old photograph. He was a living victim. Captain Howard Reynolds arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later. He looked exhausted. "You found him." Emma nodded. "Alive." Howard closed his eyes. "Then everything changes." It already has. Within an hour, the district attorney obtained emergency warrants. Not for excavation. Not for financial records. For arrests. Judge Howard Ellis's notebook. The hidden detention facility. Nathan Briggs. David Mercer's homicide. The relocation documents. The financial trail. Together, it was enough. The investigation was officially reopened. By sunrise, tactical teams assembled across the city. Emma stood in the command vehicle studying a map. 5 locations: Sloan Infrastructure Headquarters, Richard Holloway's home, Hollow Creek Strategies, the former Municipal Liaison Office, Victor Sloan's riverfront penthouse. The clock read 5:58 a.m. Howard Reynolds spoke into the radio. "All units, stand by." Emma looked at Ben. "No mistakes." He nodded. "Not today." Execute. The city erupted into motion. Police vehicles rolled silently through empty streets. Tactical officers entered office buildings. Search teams forced open doors. Evidence technicians followed behind. Emma's team headed directly to Sloan Infrastructure. The lobby looked exactly as it had during their first visit. Polished marble. Fresh flowers. The same receptionist. Except this time, 20 armed officers entered with them. Andrew Keller stepped out of the executive elevator. His confidence disappeared the moment he saw the search warrant. "Detective Hayes," Emma handed him the document. We're executing a warrant. For what? Homicide, kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy. His face turned pale. I want my attorney. Emma nodded. You'll get one. Hoo-hoo, Ben led another team toward Victor Sloan's executive office. The doors were locked. A tactical officer breached them in seconds. The office was empty. Coffee still sat on the desk. A computer remained powered on. The chair was pushed back. Emma looked around. He was here. Daniel examined the computer. It hasn't been shut down. He touched the side of the monitor. Still warm. Ben looked toward the private elevator. How long? Daniel checked system activity. Maybe 10 minutes. Emma immediately reached for her radio. Shell every exit. Too late. A parking garage camera showed a black sedan leaving the building less than 8 minutes before police arrived. Victor Sloan had escaped. 2 across town. Another tactical team entered Richard Holloway's home. The councilman offered no resistance. He stood calmly in his kitchen wearing a tailored suit, almost as though he had been expecting them. Detectives searched the house. Financial records, computers, safe deposit keys, everything. Then one officer called out, I've got something. Inside a wall safe sat dozens of passports. Different names, different photographs. Emma stared at them. Every passport was genuine. Every identity belonged to someone who officially didn't exist. Kevin arrived carrying another evidence box. You need to see this. He opened a leather-bound accounting ledger. Unlike the notebook they had found earlier, this one contained names, real payments, real signatures. Every relocation, every transfer, every shell company, every property purchase, every dollar. David Mercer had been searching for this book, the master ledger. Ben flipped through the pages. His expression hardened. Emma. She looked over. Near the back of the ledger, one page listed every active relocation site. Site A, Site B, Site C. Then, one final entry. Site DER status C, operational. Emma frowned. We only found Site C. Kevin nodded. There are more. The arrests continued throughout the day. 23 city employees, 7 accountants, 5 former inspectors, 3 attorneys, 2 procurement officers, Andrew Keller, Richard Holloway, executives from Hollow Creek Strategies. By evening, more than 40 people were in custody. The news spread across every major television network. The city watched in disbelief. For years, the corruption had hidden behind legitimate construction projects. Now it was unraveling by the hour. Late that evening, Emma returned to the hospital. Nathan Briggs sat upright for the first time. His daughter Emily, now a grown woman, stood quietly beside his bed. Neither knew what to say. 8 years couldn't be repaired with a single conversation. Emma remained outside the room. Some reunions deserved privacy. As she turned to leave, Nathan called softly. Detective. Emma stepped back inside. I need to tell you something. She pulled up a chair. Nathan looked toward the hallway to make sure they were alone. They called him, the man in charge. Emma expected him to say Victor Sloan. Instead, Nathan slowly shook his head. Sloan wasn't running it. Emma felt every muscle in her body tense. Then who was? Nathan closed his eyes. There was another man. I only heard his name once. He visited Site C after David Mercer died. Emma leaned forward. What name? Nathan whispered 2 words. The architect. Emma stared at him. Do you know his real name? Nathan slowly shook his head. No. But everyone, even Victor Sloan, answered to him. Emma walked out of the hospital carrying a single thought. Richard Holloway had been arrested. The ledger had been recovered. The conspiracy was collapsing. Yet somehow, the person who designed it all had never appeared in a single official record. The city woke to headlines it never expected to read. QNCIL man RR stud Detiausens kustar UTINGR Kiriam Amiel NV cited I tau debile CCC art detentian festiali to Kavird news Hughes helicopters circled downtown. Reporters crowded courthouse steps. Families who had spent years believing loved ones had abandoned them suddenly began asking the same question. What if they never left? The major crimes conference room looked very different now. The investigation board had been rebuilt. Only this time, every photograph carried a status beneath it. Nathan Briggs. Recovered alive. David Mercer. Recovered deceased. Sigres Linda Carver. Missing Sarah's Anthony Ruiz. Missing Gosters Asmuka Grace Whitmore's missing Grace ones. The remaining 18 names were still marked. Location unknown. Tasik Emma stood quietly in front of the wall. The arrests had been a victory. But it didn't feel complete. Not yet. Interrogations continued around the clock. Richard Holloway refused to answer a single question. Victor Sloan remained missing. Andrew Keller requested an attorney within 30 seconds of entering the interview room. Most of the city employees claimed they had simply followed procedures. Nobody admitted knowing what happened to the witnesses. Nobody admitted knowing who MHC really was. Nobody admitted knowing the identity of Vaktuka, the architect. Kevin Chen entered carrying another stack of digital reports. We finished rebuilding the ledger. Emma looked up. Anything new? Kevin nodded. The financial records go back almost 16 years. Daniel joined him at the projector. The first illegal transfer wasn't connected to Sloan infrastructure. Emma frowned. It wasn't. Daniel enlarged the oldest entry. It predated Sloan by nearly 4 years. Another construction company. Another redevelopment project. Another shell corporation. Ben slowly understood. This operation didn't start with Sloan. Emma nodded. Sloan inherited it. Director Helen Shaw entered carrying David Mercer's final forensic report. I've identified the bullet. Emma accepted the folder. .38 caliber. Common? Very. Evelyn pointed to another page, but the weapon wasn't. She placed an evidence photograph on the table. The bullet carried microscopic tool marks. Daniel searched the National Ballistics Database. A match appeared almost immediately. The weapon had been recovered once before. 12 years earlier. During another corruption investigation in another city. The suspect had never been identified. Emma stared at the screen. This wasn't local. No, Evelyn said quietly. It never was. P2 over the next several weeks, investigators executed dozens of additional search warrants. Properties owned by Hollow Creek Strategies. Storage facilities. Accounting firms. Law offices. One by one, the conspiracy unraveled. Thousands of documents were recovered. More than $200 million in frozen assets were seized. Secret bank accounts surfaced in 3 different states. The shell companies collapsed. The charities were dissolved. And Sloan Infrastructure filed for bankruptcy protection before federal prosecutors froze its remaining assets. Nathan Briggs slowly regained his strength. Physical therapy was difficult. So was learning that 8 years of his daughter's life had disappeared while he sat beneath an abandoned water treatment plant. Emily visited every day. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply sat together in silence. Neither expected 8 years of pain to disappear overnight. Emma visited only once. Nathan thanked her. She told him the truth. We're the ones who should be thanking you. 3 weeks later, a jury indicted Richard Holloway on multiple counts, including conspiracy, kidnapping, fraud, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. Andrew Keller accepted a plea agreement. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided thousands of internal Sloan infrastructure emails. The emails confirmed bribery, bid rigging, evidence destruction, witness intimidation. But one thing was missing. Every email referring to MHC had been written exactly the same way. As per previous instructions, no names, no signatures. No sender. Someone had deliberately ensured the orders could never be traced. 2. Victor Sloan remained a fugitive. Federal agencies issued warrants. Border crossings were notified. Airports flagged his passport. Months passed. There were reported sightings. None were confirmed. It was as though Victor Sloan had vanished using the very system he had helped create. Late one afternoon, Emma returned to the riverfront warehouse where David Mercer had been found. The excavation site had become quiet again. Yellow evidence markers were gone. The machinery had disappeared. Only a section of repaired concrete remained. She stood there for several minutes without speaking. Ben eventually joined her. "You thinking about David?" Emma nodded. "He got closer than anyone." Ben looked toward the river. "He paid for it. So did a lot of people." Ben broke the silence. "You ever wonder why Frank Holloway and Judge Ellis kept those notebooks?" Emma smiled faintly. "Because they hoped someone would eventually ask the right questions." She looked back at the warehouse. They couldn't stop it, but they refused to let it be forgotten. The following week, Major Crimes officially closed the Briggs investigation. The final report filled more than 3,000 pages. Hundreds of exhibits. Thousands of recovered documents. 46 arrests, 1 surviving witness. 1 identified homicide. 22 unresolved disappearances. The case status didn't read Jallersers. Solved de Jauset Rit. I say ongoing Duffson Sex, and Emma insisted on that wording. 2. As she carried the final case file toward the archives, the evidence clerk looked up. "Where do you want this one?" Emma thought for a moment. "Nuck the basement." The clerk looked surprised. "Why?" Emma smiled. "Somebody might need it someday." She placed the file on the highest shelf herself. The label read SMUIS DNIGHT Casefiles Gialzer S1E3 EVR Redo ITNES DISA PPERD0. Emma switched off the archive lights and started toward the exit. Then she noticed something lying on the clerk's desk. A plain white envelope. No postage. No return address. Only one line written across the front. Des Detective Hayes. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. No fingerprints. Only one sentence. "You found Site C. There are still 3 more." Dosser Emma read it twice. Then she looked toward the evidence shelves behind her. The investigation had exposed a corrupt construction empire, recovered a living witness, uncovered a secret detention facility, and brought dozens of powerful people to justice. But whoever had built the system, the person Nathan Briggs knew only as Yuz, the architect was still out there. Emma folded the letter and slipped it into the case file. Some mysteries ended with an arrest. Others simply revealed how much larger the truth really was. She switched off the final light. The archive door closed. And somewhere beyond the city, someone realized Detective Emma Hayes had survived long enough to become a threat